You can understand when we go over that, I'll talk about it.
Because I was the only person I've ever known that knew any words after it
When I get bit by a mosquito, it just dies.
The other
Okay.
end has to be.
Good morning, everyone. Let's start the Grand Traverse County Resource Management Administration Committee meeting on Wednesday, May 12th, 2010, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Linda.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Reese?
Present.
Max Bauer?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Stepka?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Inman?
Here.
Chairman Hooper?
Here. Okay, is there any member of the public or the board that would like to add to the agenda, or any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion for approval.
You got
Yep.
you should do
Support.
public comment.
Public
first,
comment?
but it's okay. You got public comment
Oh, I
before that.
skipped that,
Rob.
okay. This is a time for anybody in the public that would like to address the board, may come forward and state your name and address the board.
Hi, I'm Tim Edmond, and do you want my address, or
Sure.
If you'd like.
You don't have to.
you don't? Okay. And I'm just here to listen and find out about what the situation is about the sewer plant. Because Christine was explaining to me how you're going to finance it, and I'm particularly interested in that.
Okay, great.
So that's why I'm here.
Okay. It'll be on later in the agenda.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the agenda as provided.
Support.
I give a motion to support by Fleece. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay, now the consent calendar, is there, you want to read it first? Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Okay. The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. 1, Solid Waste Facility Siting Committee Appointment Planning, dated April 23, 2010. 2, 2009 Annual Report of the Grand Traverse County Planning Commission. 3, MSU Extension Correspondence, dated April 26, 2010. District 3 Coordinator Pat Cudney. 4, Safe Kids First Quarter Report, April 2010. 5, Housing Liaison Report and Project Listing. 6, Grand Traverse Conservation District Report, April 2010. 7, Grand Traverse County Road Commission Monthly Report. 8, Residential Solid Waste Services, RFP, Blair Township, memo of April 20th, 2010. B, approval. 1, Resource Management Administration Committee minutes of April 14th, 2010. 2, Planning Review Recommendations, Sheriff Storage Facility and Traverse City Senior Center. 3, Mishta Housing Grant and Fair Housing Resolutions. And 4, Wormatech Worm Digester.
Okay, is there a member of the public that would like anything removed from the consent calendar? Okay, is any member of the board?
I just have one just super quick question. Bob, we're not giving away that, we're just having them utilize it at their facility, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Support.
Okay. Moved by Inman, support by Fleece. All those in favor say aye. Oh, no.
Aye. You need a roll call on
vote,
that.
please. Sorry.
Commissioner Fleece?
Present.
Yes. We're all
Max
tired this
Bauer?
morning.
I'm sorry.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Hooper?
Yes. Okay, let's move on to department actions with MSU E Community Ties presentation by Kylie Ostrowski.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Repke, and I work with Michigan State University Extension. And I know I have spoken with you a little bit, at least once, about community ties. But this morning I have with me Kyle Ostrowski, who is one of the young people, fabulous young man, I will say, who has worked with us on the project. So Kyle, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning. Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning. My name is Kyle Ostrowski. I'm a senior at TC West Senior High. I work with MSU Extension on Community Ties Project. I've been promoting it throughout the town and wherever I happen to go. Just like to give you a little walk through the site. When you go to communityties.us, it's kind of a clever name they gave it to. This is the site you'll see, the welcoming site. You'll see here that we have a Twitter feed that's filled in by all the community organizers throughout the state. Just different things that are going on in each town. When you go to our site, you look over here on the right, click on Grand Traverse County, and it'll take you to our homepage. Here you see all sorts of different things that we've done throughout the year. Wanted to put up photo slideshow of our events. We have a featured member over here. This month it is Jody Taylor, an editor of the Record Eagle. It just gives you a little info about her. Click on her link. You can go down and check out some of the other different things going on through here. Every couple of days or so, one of us puts up a blog. The last one here is by me about the blood drive at TC West. Just gives you a little info about what's going on in the town. We've also got different blogs put by other members. And excuse me. Another thing that is really good about the site, we go here and you can go to our Zazzle store, and there I'll give you, different apparel items that are helping support TC West. All the profits from this site go to the TC West boosters, just for various improvements around our school. We've also got a poll here. This month is just about Facebook applications, but it's also about different other things. I'll just log myself in here and show you what a member site would be about.
Because for those of you that have been on the site, if you've created your profile, the general public can see various things, but you need to be approved on the site and log in to be able to communicate through the discussion forums, and so there's other things once you're logged in as a member.
And that's one kind of safety feature we use is students can create a profile with minimal or no hassle, but if you're an adult or a professional or creating a profile on here, you're screened by one of the members of the telecommunications department to make sure that you're okay to go. A little bit different going through here. You can go through here and you can check out our member directory, see who else is on. We're professionals. I'll just show you through somebody's profile to show you what we can do.
So, go back up. Yeah, we're going to log in again. The login didn't work. So you can tell what, he was looking at the members, you can see the names of the members, but you can't access any of their information unless you're logged in.
All right. We'll go with David here. He's filled his profile out really full. You can select buddies on the site and keep in contact with them through status updates or private messages. And you can also make your own profile with different information here. He's got his name, organization, website. Gives you a little bit of a kind of a mini job shadow on him. Acceptable job attire, how we got started. All sorts of information that kids would want to know if they're looking to go into a field such as his field.
So this is, sorry, and this is one of the main features on the site, and that applies to all of you here, is the more adults that we have that complete a profile, the more young people can see what we do to make a living here in northern Michigan or the other 3 counties, which is Oscoda, Otsego, and Marquette. So, as Kyle said, it's kind of a little virtual job shadow. The more you fill out, the more the young people can see what we're doing here as adults.
And that's the main aim of the site, is to get information out, get the word out to kids that are looking for information, and maybe even some help on finding internships or jobs. It's just making it accessible for kids to know what they want to know.
and ultimately keep talented young people or bring talented young people back to our community.
We've also got in here in the community directory, the company directory, pardon me, all sorts of different small businesses, maybe even big businesses in town that community organizers like myself have added on. Four Corners, which one of our internships was handed out to Amber, a sophomore at my school. You can go on there and check that out. This gives you information about them.
And actually, the reason that we came up with doing sort of this company directory is particularly one of the other sites in Oscoda County. When the young people were talking with businesses in the area, they found that there were a lot of folks that didn't even have a web presence yet. And so she thought it was important to do that. And then, of course, it had an added benefit because then, again, as young people would look at the site, they could see a whole lot more things, particularly small businesses that were here, that they might not see, you know, at the mall or you see the hospital. But you don't really know all of these things exist, so it kind of turned out really, it's a good benefit.
Now I want to show you the site that we use to keep in contact with ourselves in the project. This is called Basecamp. Pardon me. We're logged in here already. This is what you'll see when you go to the site. We got a little to-do list here, keeping contact with each other and showing what we need to do, keeping track of what needs to be done. This is my one of my tasks right here. I was at the Twilight Rotary last week. The clock is green, meaning time has already been entered, and you can keep track of your own time up here on the time tab.
So this is, have any of you heard of Basecamp? No. It's an online project management application. And so as you look at this, you'll see like the current to-do list or completed list. So this was a way to organize 10 teenagers in 4 different communities. Each week I put tasks up, and as Kyle pointed out, they could record their time. This is how I paid them. And then also you see those little bubbles at the end are comment bubbles. And if they had a question or we need to communicate about that task, it has a running record of what that conversation was. So it's really been an awesome tool to manage a project when lots of folks are working on it. They're obviously not in one place.
You can see here that we can, if we ever leave a comment or anything like that, Wanda's logged in right now. You leave a comment, and you can select who gets an email about it. You can select all of Michigan State or otherwise. Another way we keep in contact on here is through the files part of the site. We've uploaded several different things. I wrote a letter to the Record Eagle explaining the project. Wanda took some pictures of our last presentation, and we also wrote essays, different things about the project in general. So you put it on here, and you can keep in contact. I can keep in contact with Wanda and all the people down at MSU. And if there's anything you need to see is on here. So that's pretty much all I wanted to show you about the site. Now I'd like to challenge you to get on Community Ties and make your own profile, because there are plenty of kids I know that are interested in getting on some sort of a Senate or a county board, anything of the sort. And to get on there, also invite at least 2 of your friends onto there. Make your own profile and see what you can do to help out.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Kyle?
Kyle, I already have a profile on there, so I challenge 8 of my friends to put a profile on there.
You're ahead of the game. I like that. Good.
Anybody else?
I have to get my profile off the post office wall.
And if anybody needs assistance, let us know.
All righty.
Kyle would help, or we have some other young people who are familiar with that.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna sign up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the facilities report.
Good morning. Andy Brown, Grand Traverse County Facilities Director. Here to talk about the stair replacement this morning.
Yay.
I put, you had the drawing in your packet, and then I put on your desk this morning the planting plan, natural landscaping plan. got that in a little late yesterday, so. So as I alluded to here in the details, I'm here to see if we can move this forward for bidding. I did get some preliminary numbers, very preliminary, and they're a lot higher than I anticipated. The heating, I got one price for the heating element, and that is $20,000 alone.
Wow.
Just for that. And I got some general, actually got two general contractor, again, guesstimates, and they're running about $30,000. So I feel that if we take this out for bid formally, we'll get a much better locked-in price.
Okay, Chris?
Danny, I'm always concerned about what it's going to cost to maintain something after we have it. If we put in $20,000 worth of heating, have you looked at any other facilities that have heated stairs and what it costs? We do.
Hall of Justice.
Really? I didn't know that.
The front ramp and the front stairs and the sidewalks heated.
That's really why Danny looked at that option. That's worked very, very well for us, and it's reduced our maintenance down to almost nothing.
Oh, really?
And that's the reason that he got the price on that, because I think if we're going to do this, Danny feels pretty strongly that's a good way to go from a maintenance standpoint.
So the payout is worth the expense?
If you can handle the initial cost.
Okay.
Quite expensive, quite pricey. Also, the state bank, Traverse City State Bank, their whole sidewalk in front of their area heating. And of course, they never have to shovel it, so, or salt it, and they don't get salt into the building, so.
I think that's one of the keys Danny was explaining to me is it is partially the shoveling, but if we're not throwing salt down on it all the time, it's not deteriorating as quickly, and therefore it's going to, last longer for us, so.
And not tracking in on the carpeting. Pardon? And it's not being tracked in on the carpeting.
That's correct.
The other thing I would mention too is, and I don't know if Danny said it in here, but one of the options we would have is to bid that as an alternate to the project to get a separate price for it. Then you could see how it compares to the actual quote that we had, and then you could make a decision on that, as we decide, if you decide to move forward with the project.
Sonny?
Well, yeah, I would, last month we talked about the stairs, and we talked about lots of different ways to deal with it, but the one thing about the heating the stairs, and I agree with Dennis, the right way to do this is to bid it as an option, bid it as an alternate, because that way you can take the base stairs of what does it cost to build the concrete stairs, and then what does it cost to heat them. But the $20,000, over the 20-year life of the stairway, we're going to spend more than that on salt. So it's just that simple. Although it sounds like a big price tag right now, but there's a lot of feet of stairs in this thing. I just roughly ran some numbers the other night, and I can't even remember what they were. You look at the total footages of this thing, there's a lot of space down through there. Along with the fact there's a significant guardrail up at the top, and I didn't know, are you going to extend that heat up into that sidewalk area at the top of the stairs,
Just
Danny?
the first 3 or 4 feet.
From the parking lot to the stairway, the width of the stairs there, is that the idea?
Width of the stairs back from the stairs on that landing approach only.
Because I wasn't sure how that was going to work first. Trying to look at this, that should be on a 2-foot by 3-foot piece of paper on this is a little tougher for me.
Yes, it is.
I do it a lot, so it's different. But there's a lot of lineal footage of stairway here, and I like the idea of the landings in the middle of it. It makes it easier for people to go up and down the stairways.
Poor people.
Obviously, in my world, I noticed some things about the railing things, and Danny and I have talked. In fact, I spoke with Fred about it the other day when I was doing another project with him. So, and there's some questions that we can ask about that, but that's for a later time.
Okay, and as for handicap accessible, we can use the elevators, and that's, because I don't see a ramp design.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, in the initial discussion that we had, and let's see, that was in 2008, we were going to put a ramp down at the other end by the bridge, the 8th Street Bridge. That would allow handicapped people to access that river area. But as far as accessing our building, they can go through the elevator.
Okay. So we're covered that way.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we authorize facilities to solicit competitive bidding on this project.
Support.
Okay, motion by Wheelock, support by Fleece. Any further discussion?
With the option for the heated
Yeah,
heated concrete.
I'm assuming that's what they'll do is
That's
do
actually
do
on
the
the
masonry, do the masonry stairs and do the heating as an option.
Just a follow-up question. The last time we talked about this, there was some mention, I think by Dennis, that there was, one of the reasons why we kind of stalled on this whole thing was that there was issues regarding the surrounding area.
The retaining wall?
And the retaining walls and those kinds of things. So this project's not going to deter, something that the board needs to do at a later date in the surrounding area.
No, it won't
Okay.
have anything to do with each other.
Okay.
But I did cut the trees, so that stopped the growth of those trees and pushing that retaining wall out.
All right. Okay. All right, good.
Larry?
Danny, is there an alternative to the painted steel rails? Like either a coated rail or something
coated.
that's like a maintenance-free?
Well, powder coated is about as close as you can get to that, right, Sonny?
I don't know which hat I've got on right now, so there's a couple options that you can do. Number one, you can do powder coating, which is more durable than a liquid paint. Number two, you could do hot dip galvanized. Now, the rails at Twin Lakes, for example, were hot dip galvanized and then they were painted. They didn't want just the shiny gray, galvanized effect, so they galvanized them for durability and then they painted over them. That's also the process that was used at the Marina Park at Charlevoix and several other parks, Michigan DNR building in Cadillac, the one in Baldwin, that I know of off the top of my head real easily.
Any further discussion?
I guess probably in all transparencies, I have to let you know that because what I do a lot, no matter who the general contractor is on this project, there's at least a very good chance that I'll be bidding the railing parts. So this will probably be the end of my discussion as far as this project. Just because, I do railings every day.
Sounds like private
That's what I do a lot, so. And that's why the key questions came up when I looked at this drawing yesterday, and I might as well, or the day before yesterday, might as well tell you what the questions are. If this railing is truly at ground level, I'm not sure that the code is going to require you to have a guardrail that has the horizontal spindles in it, because if it's at ground level, it doesn't have a 24-inch drop at 3 feet out from the stairway, it doesn't require a guardrail. All it requires is a handrail. So you take that price of that railing that's running down through there from $65 to $70 a linear foot down to $25 a foot plus installation, if you go to a two-line pipe rail. The way it's drawn, it's a 42-inch guardrail with a 36-inch handrail, which would be the requirement for a commercial guardrail with a handrail. But because of the fact that it's at ground level, it doesn't require, at least in my mind, it doesn't require a guardrail.
Would having it more expensive the higher, as it's designed, would that limit liability?
Well, Danny and I talked about a couple things. Number one, are we putting the guardrail here to keep someone from falling off the stairs onto the plantings, or are we putting the guardrail there to keep some kid from crawling over and digging around in the plantings? If we're, one or the other. And then the other question, I always question horizontal spindles because they give it a ladder effect for kids. Kids climb over the top.
Well, Danny, let's check that with Bruce.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and what I told Danny is one of the things we have to talk about, because this stairs is kind of unique in that we have to, even though it's down through a planting area, we have to determine whether or not it's truly a landscape stairway or if it's an egress stairs. But because of that bottom door of from the old cafeteria, I'm not sure it doesn't qualify as an egress stair, but there's a distance in the code. If it's so far from the opening, then it becomes part of the landscaping, and those are questions that need to be answered, and we talked about those too. So there are some questions to be done before the final specifications are put out.
If you don't overdo your plantings, they're not going to be in there after. You can always put poison ivy in there.
Good. Thistle.
People will tend to leave it alone.
One thing that we looked at is, the original plan that we brought you had really extensive plannings in it, and Danny has had his staff look at this, and the plannings have been scaled back significantly to a much more manageable cost, and something that'll be easier to maintain, and so Danny had a hand in that, and I think that's going to bring the cost of the landscaping down significantly.
What was where was the funding source for this?
None's been identified at this time, and like I told, except as I told you the last, when we discussed it earlier, it would have to come from the capital fund. We have no money set aside for this, so it would have to come from your capital improvement fund.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Everybody understand the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same? Okay, unanimous.
All right, Dan?
Okay, thank you.
Bid specs.
Okay, now we can move on to resource recovery. Bob?
Morning, Bob Ostraut, Resource Recovery Manager. At the April meeting of the Resource Recovery Council, the council members voted to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to change the reporting structure of the Resource Recovery Council and the Resource Recovery Department from the Board of Public Works to report directly to the Board of Commissioners. And they asked me to come today to present this to you and for discussion and recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Chris.
I would move that the Resource Recovery Council report directly to the Board of Commissioners.
Support.
Is that all that needs to be done?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that what you need to do is you need to ask Scott Howard or Bob Cooney, and I'm suggesting Scott do it if Bob's okay with that, to look at the solid waste plan, look at the ordinance, look at what steps legally we have to take to make that change, and provide for us kind of the guidelines on how that would have to be done, because I think some of those documents have to be modified in order for this to take place. So I think if it's okay with the Commissioner, I think an appropriate motion would be to have the legal review done and bring us back the process to actually enact that.
I will certainly change my motion to that. I did make the motion for purpose of discussion.
Yeah, and I think Scott Howard would be the one to do that, if you're okay with that, Bob.
Just add after legal review.
After legal review, fine.
Okay, who's the second? Was Larry, you were the second?
It was Dick.
Okay, and, okay, so Max Bauer and Thomas on the motion to move ahead with legal review. Chris?
And I would just like to add, one of the reasons I think that this makes sense is I think really the Board of Public Works needs to concentrate on the septage and sewer and water. We do have other boards that directly report to the Board of Commissioners, such as the Commission on Aging Board, such as the Parks and Rec Board, and this to me only makes sense.
Sonny?
Well, you know, I wasn't at the April Resource Recovery meeting, or it wouldn't have been a unanimous vote, I can assure of that. You know, one thing that we heard overwhelmingly from Scott Howard at the May Resource Recovery meeting is that these contracts with the townships are with the Board of Public Works, not with Grand Traverse County. So, you know, in order to make this happen, you're going to have to change a lot of the documentation, because the intergovernmental agreements between the townships and the Board of Public Works that gives Grand Traverse County the authority by which to regulate and manage the solid waste stream in this community are between the townships and the Board of Public Works, not this county board. Mm-hmm. And therefore, those documents are all going to need to be changed in order to make this happen. That being said, these intergovernmental agreements are up for renewal December 31st of 2010. If we don't change them or we don't get out of them before that, they automatically renew for a 5-year period. So if we're going to have this discussion, this is the time to have it. And that's why Bob has been charged by the Board of Public Works to go out to all of the townships and find out whether or not they're going to renew the Board of Public Works, or the intergovernmental agreement. You know, the discussion evolves, and later in our packet here, we have an RFP that Bob prepared for Blair Township to go out and solicit bids. You know, it's my opinion, and I'm not sure if that Scott, he didn't say he disagreed, I think there was other members that do agree, that by townships soliciting private bids, they are violating the intergovernmental agreement as it's written right now. And that includes, the solicitation by Garfield Township and the city. The way I read the intergovernmental agreement, it's an absolute violation of the intergovernmental agreement. The only entity that has the ability by which to solicit bids is the Board of Public Works. So the question's going to become, how many of these townships are actually going to renew the intergovernmental agreement? Because if they're not, Ordinance 17 will probably go away, which is our county ordinance that regulates solid waste, because the only authority by which Ordinance 17 has any power is the intergovernmental agreements from the townships. So, this isn't quite as simple as just saying we want Bob to come to the county's Resource Management Committee to report monthly. There are legal ramifications of this change, and whether or not the renewals are going to happen. And, Bob can speak to how many townships he's actually talked to that are very excited about renewing the intergovernmental agreement.
I think that's the reason that I'm asking you to have the review done, because there may be various mechanisms to accomplish this, and I think with Scott looking at it, that's the best way for us to kind of find out what our options are. In terms of the intergovernmental agreements in the future, I know Bob's working on that. There's quite a bit that's going on with the Resource Recovery Council. There's a lot of things happening there that haven't been happening until very recently.
We did more in 10 minutes last week than
Yes, you
we've done in
did.
10 years.
There's discussions about eliminating the drop-offs. I think there actually was a motion,
Yes.
correct?
That's
To eliminate the
recommendation.
drop-offs. They're looking at the surcharge and other funding sources. There's a lot happening there, and I think this is the first step. I think, and I was going to talk about it for a second later, it's premature because Blair Township is evaluating their bids. I want to make it clear that while it may be not following the intent or the legality of the law in terms of their bid, I want to make it very clear that the county participated in that with them. Bob wrote the RFP that the township took out, and I'm going to tell you, I think we're all going to be pleased by I saw the preliminary results yesterday. I think we're going to all be pleased by the results that Blair Township got, and it's going to encourage others. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's important to note that, these comments about, well, the county hasn't been able to do it, and, the townships are going to have to do it themselves. In part, that's true. But I want to make it clear that the reason the township was able to do it was because of what the county provided in support services by developing the RFP and reviewing the RFPs.
Okay. Chris?
Well, I just wanted to add, I was at the Resource Recovery Council meeting, and my interpretation of what the intergovernmental agreement and what Blair did is different than Commissioner Wheelock's. As I heard Scott Howard during that meeting, he was saying that if you're, as a township, going out and asking for information rather than a bid, which is what I understand you wrote, Bob.
Right, the RFP
Then that's fine. And Blair really did not, at least in my mind, based on what Scott Howard said, violate that intergovernmental agreement. And it just gave them information to determine whether or not they should pull out of the intergovernmental agreement and go on their own for the solid waste disposal.
Right, the RFP is actually good for 240 days, the pricing. So they went out to see what it would cost to provide services for the township. They were looking at different pricing for weekly recycling, weekly trash, bulky waste pickup. So there is no date of an award or a date of contract. Blair Township intends on getting out of the intergovernmental agreement and providing solid waste services for the townships themselves, which was the purpose of doing now, trying to find out what the pricing would be so they could, get some ballot language and look at funding to fund the solid waste system within their township.
There's no question in my mind that this would be better done collectively with, kind of a regional approach to this. And that's the reason that the county put up the $50,000 to allow all these local units to participate in the evaluation of bidding out services, and Blair Township participated in that along with many others. So I just think it's important that what comes out of this is not that there was a violation perhaps by Blair Township. What I'd like to see come out of this, especially for those of you watching at home, is that the county took the initiative to get this thing going and recognized that the solution to this problem might not be dictated from the county, but dictated from the local units. And that might be the most reasonable way to approach this. And I think what you're saying here is the result of that. I would have preferred to see everybody collectively go and do it together. But listen, the bottom line is, I think people are going to pay less. And that's the important aspect of this. And it's because we put up the $50,000, at least in part, to get that study done. And so I think it's important that the county be recognized for their involvement that way.
Just two remarks. One is that for folks to say the county has done nothing on this particular issue, I guess I'm a bit frustrated with that. You know, back when Dennis came in 2001, it was a time and point where the board wanted to move forward with a county-wide bidding process. We went to all the townships because they're part of the interlocal agreement. They're partners with us. They decided they did not want to do that, and they wanted local market to have control over that in terms of pricing and who they can contract with. And as Dennis indicated, you know, the county did spend money on our part for this study between Garfield Township and the city, which was hopefully going to be used as a model for the other local units of governments to review and make decisions on. And so, you know, we did do something in that part in terms of leadership. The other part is that, as you know, with our joint meetings that we've had annually with the townships and those elected officials, we've always brought up the issue of what does everybody want to do? I mean, you know, can we have some kind of consensus? And we've never been able to get a consensus from the representatives from the townships as to what they would like to do in terms of, you know, trash and cost of trash and recycling. So, for someone to make a remark that we've done nothing, you know, I think we've tried to do the leadership point. I think we've tried to do the outreach effort. We've tried to educate them. We've contributed money towards a study that hopefully everyone can use and use as a model. So, you know, they have, from my perspective, you know, we're not the sole decisioning body on this issue, in that, you know, this interlocal agreement really is the responsibility of everybody, all the townships in the county, to come together and have an agreement on how they would like to handle this thing. So, you know, by their virtue of not really responding over a period of years to what we would ask them to do in terms of what direction do you want to go, I'm a bit frustrated by those folks that believe that we've done nothing. The second issue is that I would hope that, you know, whatever happens on the issue of the recycling bins and the landfill surcharge, that we go through a process that at least identifies how we're going to deal with recycling and how that will be funded, whether it will be funded within the bidding process, either by multi-township or township, or however structure they want to have it in, that there is a mechanism that we continue to have a recycling program, whether it's curbside or in the main populated areas and bins and in the more rural areas, that those decisions hopefully would be put in place before we would just pull the bins. So that's just my two comments for tonight.
We'll go to Ross and this way.
Dennis, I was wondering how you feel about this just from an administrative standpoint of, you know, Bob reporting directly to you instead of through the Board of Public Works.
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I think I've heard from several commissioners that they feel that's a more, that they would feel better about that direct contact. There's absolutely no problem from an administrative standpoint. I think there may be some issues legally, that's why we need to have Scott look at it, but it will work fine, as long as the board is comfortable.
I think it would certainly speed the process up.
Last night at Blair's regularly scheduled meeting, they set a date for a special meeting, I believe it's May 20th, to review the ballot language and to talk about the bids themselves. Also, regarding what was in the paper, reference the recycling drop-off sites, I've heard more controversy about that since that was in the paper. In fact, it's akin to the septic plant assessment. And the people in the rural townships are absolutely opposed to them going away for a multitude of reasons.
Well, then the option is, I guess, the townships fund them.
Yeah, that's the option.
Well, let's talk about that for a quick second, just, theoretically. The Resource Recovery Council has also talked about dropping significantly, if we drop the recycling bins, dropping significantly the surcharge or changing it to another mechanism. Well, I guess theoretically, anyway, if that happens and the surcharge is dropped significantly or goes away, that should result in savings on the monthly fee to homeowners, which I know that I've said that all along. Will it actually be a drop? But it should be, because cost of the companies will be less because they won't be paying that or collecting that surcharge. And if that's the case, it may be that the local units of government may be able to put in PA 69 or 138, if I got the numbers right, and have their own recycling if that's the way they choose. I really think that Commissioner Inman brings up an interesting point. Since I've been here, this county board has been very adamant about a couple of things. First of all, the answers to these problems have to be driven collectively, locally, if that's going to happen, and you've tried time and time again. But I think the evidence is pretty clear, whether it's a septic plant or it's solid waste. Local units of government have very different needs and very strongly express them to the county board, and sometimes I think leadership has to recognize, as you have, that the solution may not be a collective solution. It may have to be individual solutions, and maybe that's where we're getting to here, and I don't think we should feel bad about that. But it's gotten here because of the direction that you've pushed it. So,
Can I just make one statement? When they made a recommendation to remove the drop-off stations, they also, part of that motion was to look at some way to expand the curbside recycling into the county and to make it available for every resident in the county. So we were looking at that as well, not necessarily a condition, but something that we think we should address as well before we remove any containers, see how we can provide recycling to every resident in the county. We also looked at how can we encourage multi-unit apartments and such, mobile home areas, to provide recycling to their residents as well. So we're looking at this as just not pulling the drop-off stations, but finding a way to also expand recycling to everyone.
and it's important to recognize when Bob says that about the advisory council saying curbside countywide, they're not saying necessarily that it's mandated countywide. They're saying, is there a mechanism where we can license or require the haulers to make it available countywide to anyone who wants it? So there's some real distinctions there, and they haven't come to a decision on that. They're evaluating it.
Hey, Sonny?
Yeah, well, there was a couple different motions that were involved in this discussion. First was the motion to declare Grand Traverse County curbside recyclable countywide. That means that it is available countywide. It's not mandated that everyone has to recycle, but it is available to anyone in Grand Traverse County. The discussions come into, what do you do about mobile home parks and apartment buildings that currently do not have recycling available? Well, from my perspective, then you put pressure on the landlords by which they have to make it available to their tenants. That's, if it's available to, we are not saying that it's not available to them. We say that it's a curbside district, it has to be the hauler has to make it available to them. Whether or not the landlord makes it available to his tenant is still a landlord decision. No different than you as a homeowner have the ability to choose or not choose whether you want recycling at the end of your driveway. That's a decision that's made by them. The second motion was to eliminate the drop-off sites. They cost over half of the money of our entire resource recovery budget. And, we talk about the surcharge and how it funds it, but don't forget that 65 to 70% of the solid waste in this county is produced by commercial industrial businesses. So it's the businesses in this county that are paying for those drop-off sites, 65 to 70% of it. And by our regulations, they're not available to them. 65 to 70% of the resource recovery budget is funded by commercial businesses, and we do minimal as far as making recycle available to businesses. The average household produces, a 1 ton of garbage a year? So at $9 a ton that we have for a surcharge, the average residential household pays $9 a year toward recycling.
$7.50 now.
Or $7.50 because we reduced it.
Right.
So, the discussions were and the other piece of the discussion that has started to happen, and is going to happen more, is whether or not it's Grand Traverse County's responsibility to be in the recycling business, or is it our responsibility to provide education and resources by which people are able to recycle. The number of hours that Bob spends taping the ends of little batteries and putting them in individual packages so as that they can be recycled is ridiculous. We shouldn't be in that business. We should be in the business of promoting recycling and educating people on how to recycle. I don't believe we should be in the recycling business. And when you take from that, you also look at the drop-off sites. Are they the same thing? Are we promoting recycling, or are we actually doing the recycling? If we're doing the collection, we're doing the recycling.
Beth, do you have a comment?
I just wanted to ask Bob a question. For a successful recycling program, I'm working under the assumption that you really have to have various alternatives and methods of recycling available to people, that it's not really a one-size-fits-all solution, one way to recycle. Would that be correct?
That is correct. I mean, if you look around different communities, even in Michigan and other states, you will find a program that's just curbside recycling. Then you'll find some that has curbside recycling, may have one drop-off station or two, depending how the multi-units, for example, participate. If the multi-units participate in recycling, you see very few drop-off stations. Where I came from, we had curbside recycling, and we had 4 drop-off stations. The drop-off stations were mainly for the multi-units, people who didn't have recycling. But if they do have recycling, then you don't see as many drop-off stations as you would in this area. So, it depends on what's available to the residents to recycle. If they can participate at curbside and multi-units provide recycling, then, the drop-off stations are, something you may not need.
Okay. The other thing I thought it was interesting to notice, you were talking about individual solutions and how it's really gone down to the local level. It's kind of funny to come to that conclusion in a time when everybody's talking about collaboration, isn't it?
Absolutely. Interesting point.
The other thing is, I just wanted to let you know, completely unsolicited, somebody had contacted me to let me know that they very much appreciated you coming to the county and the job that you've been doing since you've been here. So I want to let you know.
Well, I thought we were talking about restructuring the Resource Recovery Council, but if you want to have a discussion on drop-offs, I'm ready to go. But are we, but should we?
Yeah, we have a motion on the table. All right, to go forward with the legal research of the resource recovery change. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Yes, the Parks and Recreation. Thank you, Chris. Nice to be spaced out there.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jason
Morning.
Jones, Parks and Rec Commission, or Parks and Rec Director. I've got three items on the agenda this morning. First item is in regards to the Maple Bay Entry Road and Loop parking. Since Maple Bay has been part of county parkland, we've done very few improvements there. There is one entry road into the westernmost portion of the property that leads to a parking area at the trailhead leading to the beach. This is the most heavily used area of the park, and some money was set aside a few years ago in the amount of $18,316 to improve that road. So we received 3 bids from Elmer's, SRW, and RW Pop, and they're presented here, and I'm recommending that we move forward with Elmer's at a cost not to exceed $11,998. The reason for that price is there is an option of stripping topsoil and placing sand on the roadway for $2,200. In order to do that, they'd have to check to make sure that there's enough topsoil there instead of hauling in additional topsoil. So that $2,200 is an option. The recommendation I have is to move forward with Elmer's at a price not to exceed $11,998 based on the $2,200 option that will be made once Elmer's is out there on site.
Chris?
I have a question, Jason.
Sure.
I see that the drive dimension for Elmer's, SRW, and RW Pop are different.
They are.
Why?
Elmer's was able to give us a quote for a 14-foot wide drive is preferable. We asked for 10-foot. Elmer's was able to give us the additional 4 feet, the entire length of the drive, as well as a 100-foot diameter loop versus an 80-foot diameter loop, still at a lower price than SRW and RW Pop.
Do you have any idea how much traffic we have, people going there?
I don't have a car count at that facility. The one entry road that is there is started out essentially as a farm lane 2-track. And there are a few soft spots in that 2-track, and that 2-track's now become a 6-track because people have created alternative routes in getting around the soft spots. It is starting to encroach. I'm concerned that it's starting to encroach on some of the wetland reserve areas, which would create an issue for some of the grinding sources that we've got for that property.
So you feel there is enough traffic to justify this?
There is enough traffic to justify. It is something that was identified within the master plan for the park. They identify existing drives should be improved to the extent of a more serviceable surface of gravel or crushed limestone to accommodate persons with disabilities, and the existing parking should be configured into a loop configuration.
Larry?
Jason, the way I read these quotes, you're talking roughly 14,000 square feet, correct?
Correct.
And what would Elmer's price be if it's at 14,000 square feet instead of what they've quoted? Would they stay at the 43.7?
I could get clarification on that.
Because I think that's important. Number one, I think the bids ought to, when you're going out for bids, it ought to be apples for apples, and there's a quantity sometimes factor that enters in. Maybe SRW and RW Pop, given the square footage that Elmer's quoted, would have been lower also.
If I could, I agree. I think several of the commissioners have mentioned that. I guess the first question I would ask is there a significant advantage to having the larger diameter loop and the driveway dimension? Did you want 10 feet or did you want 14 feet?
10 feet is the minimum. 10 foot is, or a 10-foot wide drive and the 80-foot is the minimum. Elmer's was able to give us a price for a larger.
I understand.
So that's a minimum.
10 foot is what you asked for?
Correct.
Okay. You know, some would argue that Elmer's was not responsive to the bid because they didn't bid a 10-foot. So my suggestion is if the Parks Board wanted, if you want 10 feet, you need to go back and get a price from Elmer at 10 feet. If you want 14 feet, go back to the other two and get a price for the other two of 14 feet. And then, and I'd ask the board's indulgence, if he can do that by the county board, is it okay to bring that back with the new prices at the county board?
I
Instead of
think so.
waiting a month?
Yeah, I think
That's the
so.
appropriate way to go.
Okay, could we do that, Jason?
Yep.
Sure.
Ross, do you have a question?
That's fine. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right, do we have consensus on that?
Absolutely.
All right, Twin Lakes.
Next item is Twin Lakes, wrapping up some of the small changes at Twin Lakes. And I've outlined the three changes that are included in the change order number 3. The first item is installing sleeves under the sidewalks for a future irrigation system at Twin Lakes Park. Second item was adding a drainage area around the drinking fountain near the beach at a cost of $409. And we had to make some on-site changes to the sidewalk where it met with the entry into the universally accessible playground at a cost of $615.25. Those three changes result in a change order of cost of $3,036.41. With the other two change orders we've had, the other two change orders have resulted in a net decrease of $2,255. If this change order is approved, our budget will be over budget by $780.51 of a $508,000 project.
How are you going to pay that extra shortfall?
We have that, we anticipated the price that we got from Hallmark was less than we had reserved for the project.
So you have the
We
extra
have reserve-
$700?
We have fund balance within this project.
And Ross.
How many, I know this is pretty minor, but how many sleeves underneath the sidewalk are we talking?
You guys are asking the same questions. I mean, I'm hearing the same.
Yeah, I am.
You're on the same page.
I have the luck of having him right here, so I
They had to
just.
go underneath, I live on a corner, so they had to go underneath a lot of sidewalks, so it was part of the project. It wasn't a
It's
big
easy.
deal.
I want to say I can't give you an exact number. It was right around, I want to say 15 or so.
Okay.
One of the issues we had when this was originally designed, irrigation was not taken into consideration for this project.
Well, will installing the sleeves save money on irrigation
Yes.
at a later point?
Yes, it will.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. I think the sleeves have been installed.
The sleeves have been
You said to
installed.
go ahead last fall and install the sleeves, not go ahead with the drainage, with the watering project because of the cost. So you said, yes, put in the sleeves, and so he's coming back now.
I mean, I'll take your word for it. I remember not approving the irrigation. I don't remember approving the sleeves, but, like I said, I'll take your word for it.
Jason, there's also sleeves going to that center area in the turnaround, right?
Yes, there are.
I think there's one from each side.
Yes.
So that goes all the way
That goes
underneath the drive.
onto the
then.
sidewalk, all the way across that driveway parking lot area and
Yeah.
into that center area. So, we're looking at some pretty significant sleeves.
Yeah, well,
where
that
it's
is a
all-
lot more significant than getting across a 4-foot sidewalk.
Yeah, it's a lot of difference, but I'm
Yeah.
sure the irrigation, or the sleeves were put in to provide irrigation into that center area because we have plantings in there.
Correct.
We
Do you
had
have a motion?
funding issues last
Ask a
fall.
question before I-
We had
There were grants that you were hoping that would come in that had not come in yet. Has that situation changed at all?
We had funding issues related to purchasing and installing the floating dock system, which has now become a separate phase of this project. I'm still working on grants. I've got one major grant out to the DTE Foundation, who have historically been strong partners with local parks and recreation departments.
Okay, so the answer is that we haven't resolved those yet, but we're still working on it.
Correct.
Larry?
Jason, we had some complaints about the curbs out there where they were redone and handicap accessibility. Has that been looked into and taken care of?
Actually, Russ Clark and I went and talked to those folks. We met them out at the park to address those issues. And we've come up with a few ideas, and I'm working with our project engineer on those right now to come to some resolution with those.
Larry, when I spoke to those individuals, one of the problems was the final course of asphalt hadn't been installed yet. So we had a 2.5-inch drop that we won't have when the final asphalt course is installed. And
Okay,
and
thank you.
the approaches up to the poured concrete were not done because the final course of asphalt didn't get in last fall.
Okay, do we have a motion for this recommendation? Larry?
I would move that we authorize Twin Lakes change order number 3 in the amount of $3,036.41.
I'll second.
Moved by Fleet, second by Richardson. Sonny?
Bob, I have to ask the question because I was a subcontractor on a portion of this project, not anything to do with these change orders. Do you want me not to vote on this issue?
No, you're not an original party to the contract, so I don't think.
No, but I was a subcontractor and I have abstained from other votes on this project, so that's why I was asking.
I think you have a reason you could abstain if you like, but you don't have to.
Okay, do you want a roll call?
Yes.
Okay, let's roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer.
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
I'm going to abstain.
Please?
Yes.
Chairman Hooper?
Yes. Okay, now to number 3, Hefner easement report.
The next item that I've got for you, I presented some information from Mr. Hefner that regarding an easement adjacent to our Vasa Trailhead Park area. Mr. Hefner's here in the audience. He's got some additional handouts for the commission and would like to address the commission if you're willing to have him do so.
I think that'd be a good idea, yes.
On passing out these handouts, I'd like to say that I haven't had much exposure to the county government. And I can say that I'm appreciative and thankful for your getting up early doing people's business.
Thank you.
How you doing? Yeah, it'll fade fast.
Thank you.
You'll bring it up. Get yourself comfortable. Okay.
Mr. Hefner, make sure you speak into the microphone. You can even pull it over a little bit if you need to, so you can be picked up. Thank you.
I'll just give you a moment to look at the handout.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Hefner?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Support.
We have a motion to support. Any further discussion? Sonny?
How do you access your property?
There's a 33-foot easement off of Bartlett Road that goes into property that Dick Erickson and Meredith Erickson own.
So you access the property as far as your driveway to your home will be off from Bartlett Road.
Yes. On the sketch here, the first option right across from Arlington shows there's a 66-foot outlot for that 30 acres. And yes, we could run utilities down that 33-foot easement that we have, but it would not be suitable for any development, future development in there for the 30 acres.
Well, probably if you bring it down that way, you have to pay for the transformer too, and if anyone ties on that transformer within the next 5 years, you get a portion of your money back. I dealt with that with one recently for my daughter, so. Bob, do we set a precedent in doing this? Is there any legal reason we shouldn't grant this easement?
Well, the only concern I had, and I talked to Jason about this, was that normally the county can't just give away property for nothing, and I don't know what the value of this easement would be, probably not a whole lot is my guess. But I did notice that at the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting on the last page there, it shows that Peter Doran had made some requests, and they were agreed to by the property owners, and in my mind, it would be adequate compensation if part of the agreement is these things that Mr. Doran discussed, but that would involve, I'm not sure if it would involve a separate deed of an easement by Mr. Hefner to the county of these rights to relocate utility lines across their property. That's probably what would be required, but that would be adequate compensation for the county, in my mind, if there were, I guess, a mutual sort of easement that we can use the Hefner property. Otherwise, if that's not done, the county should somehow get a value of that easement, and it should charge the Hefners if they want to have that easement.
Hey, Ross?
So Bob, do we need some sort of a legal document? The sort of mutual granting of easements here?
Well, it would be an easement, okay, which would be a recordable instrument.
Recordable document, yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
It would be a document that would be recorded, and, yeah.
Because at this point in time, all you have is what we have right here, right?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't look like that would be, the agreement, I guess if you want to call that, was made part of the motion necessarily at Parks and Recreation. I don't know if it was or not, but I think that this board should make it part of its
Motion?
motion.
Bob, it was made part of the motion
was
at
made
Parks
part
and
of the
Rec,
motion.
yes.
So I would agree with that.
Compensation for the easement. Okay, and second approves that? Who was second?
Chris? Weren't you
No,
the second?
wasn't me.
Yeah, you were second.
Was this?
Yeah,
Was it me?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, it was me.
Okay, so we have the motion and with the stipulation of compensation for the easement. Okay, Ross again?
Now, Mr. Hefner, I assume the main reason for this is that it's much cheaper to go to the Vasa barn than it is all the way up to Bartlett Road, right?
Yes.
Okay, do you have an estimate of about how much money extra it would cost you if you had to go to Bartlett Road, or?
The cost from Vasa Barn to our house was about $2,700 with credits that Cherryland was applying. And I'm just using round numbers. If it's a third of the distance, probably it'd be almost 3 times more.
Okay.
And we're not against reasonable, compensation.
Did Parks and Rec define what reasonable compensation
Well,
is?
Bob, I don't have my Parks and Rec minutes in front of me. I should have brought them. But I recall Mr. Doran saying in the motion that if required to move the lines for the park, it would have to be done at Mr. Hefner's expense. That was in the motion. I thought.
I'm assuming it's what was said here on the
Yeah.
second page of this handout.
And the motion was made based upon Mr. Doran's recommendations, and then, of course, review by Mr. Coons.
So does that define adequate compensation?
It's adequate compensation as far as I'm concerned, but I don't know if that's adequate compensation as far as Mr. Cooney is concerned legally.
I think the mutual easements would be adequate compensation.
All right, that's fine.
Can you
So
restate
we don't have to change the motion.
Can you restate it?
You want to restate it, Larry?
Well, the motion was to approve as presented, or approved as recommended by the Parks and Rec Board.
With the adequate compensation.
Yeah, with mutual
Yeah, which
compensation.
is what they recommend.
Mutual easement, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Happy has a question.
Yeah.
And that's, just to clarify, that's just for legal purposes of, I'm not trying to express what the value of that easement is, because I just have no expertise in that area.
Sure.
But you're getting some consideration in return for the easement if you have these guarantees. And so I would just ask that you make them part of your motion.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Prudent. Rick?
I presume by looking at this picture here that the lines into the barn are underground,
Yes,
and they're going to be underground from there to your place, too.
yes. Once they go underground, they stay underground.
Never know they're there.
But that's, considering the case, it's a better way to go.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that the line is going perpendicular from the property line to the transformer and then
Yeah.
along the property line in the setback, so is that,
That was Mr. Clark.
That minimizes the risk that we're going to do anything else on that property that's going to interfere with this line.
Okay, we have a motion. Beth?
This is a little bit separate, but you kind of outlined your volunteer activities with the VASA, and just as, one representative of the community, I want to thank you for it. It sounds significant and substantial.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That means, the Vasa Trail means so much to me that my ashes are going to be spread on that trail.
Wow.
Okay. All right, does everybody understand the motion and all its repercussions? All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay, and then we have Russ Clark presentation.
Orange stuff.
Are those big readable copies?
You have glasses on?
This copy that
Well,
that
no,
was
I
emailed to me, Russ, makes it really hard to read.
printed off what was emailed to me, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
I had to find a magnifying
That's
glass.
what Sonny said this morning.
That's what I old here.
Fine print gets us all at some point.
Very fine.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you. What I have is an independent analysis that I've done of all of the municipalities and the Recreation Authority within Grand Traverse County, trying to get some idea of what kind of dollars are being spent currently on Parks and Recreation between the townships, the villages, the city, the county, and the Recreation Authority.
Get reading about this.
The primary purpose in doing this analysis was to determine the amount of dollars being spent currently, determine how many Parks and Recreation commissions or committees there are within the county, determine the total number of parks and acres available by municipality, and analyze the staffing, the budgets, percentage of total budgets for Parks and Recreation programs and facilities by municipality, and determine the parkland to population ratio, in other words, the area per person, and as well as the recreation budget to population by municipality, the recreation dollars per person. We have 13 townships, 2 villages, 1 city, 16 municipalities. We have 1 recreation authority, which is through an elected or a vote of the population of Garfield and the city of Traverse City to create the Traverse City Garfield Township Park Authority, specifically for 3 parks. They are the historic Barnes property, Hickory Meadows, and the West Bay waterfront property, i.e. the volleyball court area. That is financed through a continuing operating cost of .0994 mils until the year 2023. That generates about $151,000 a year. Township population by the 2000 census in descending order, Garfield to the largest, Union Township to the smallest. The 2 villages, the city and Grand Traverse County populations in the 2000 census. And these are the numbers I use for comparisons. When I looked at across the board throughout all of the various entities within the county, we have elected, appointed, and in terms of Parks and Recreation Commissions or committees, and we also have some municipalities with no recreation authorities. 6 of the 13 townships do not have a Parks and Recreation Commission. They are, or committee, they are Garfield, Whitewater, Fife Lake, Mayfield, Grant, and Union Townships. 2 townships have an elected Parks and Recreation Commission, East Bay and Peninsula. Number of parks and acreages, again, it's that fine print issue. Summary, we have 102 properties throughout the county that are locally controlled, and that equates to 6,500 acres of recreation land. 3 of the townships do not have any local parks: Fife Lake, Mayfield, and Grant. The township parkland total areas range in size from 3.5 acres to 700 acres. The city of Traverse City has 34 parks, a total area of 318 acres, plus the Brown Bridge Quiet Area, which is 1,275 acres, totaling 1,594 acres of recreation land. Grand Traverse County has 11 parks, a total area, I'm saying approximately of 1,599 acres. That still needs to be verified in detail. And Garfield Township Traverse City Park Authority has 3 parks with a total of 177 acres. When we start looking at staffing, several municipalities do not have staffing, some do. As we know, several municipalities utilize various entities such as the Conservation District for staffing purposes, specifically Garfield Township. We have 29 full-time staff in the county and 96 part-time staff related to recreation, programming, and maintenance. Annual budgets. Currently, there's $3,673,000. Yeah, 3.6 million plus being spent by the various municipalities throughout the county, including we have one township that spends $0. And as you look at this budget, you will see that we have several townships contributing money to Civic Center South. The number that I was given for Grand Traverse County was a number that was combining both the Parks and Recreation budget and some of the facilities management budget, as I was trying to get both operating, programming, and maintenance cost involved in these numbers. The percentage of the total budget being spent on recreation varies from 0% to a high of 12%. And that varies by community, and we have to recognize that some of the townships, such as Acme and Garfield, are in an aggressive purchasing mode at this point, acquiring parkland and expanding their recreation facilities, and so their budgets are proportionately higher at this point in time compared to other communities. The people to parkland ratio, in other words, what does that mean when my township has 700 acres of land versus the population that we are currently have within our community, how many acres or square feet does that give me access to within my municipality? Well, that varies tremendously from 0 to 11,000 square feet per person within a municipality. It's just giving some type of a measuring stick of availability of local recreational land. And I do not include state land or federal land in this number, nor do I include the county park land that may be in a Pacific Township. This is by municipality only. And then the county at the bottom, based on our population, the acres available, as well as the city, you can see. And then the ratio of dollars spent per person also varies from 0 to as high as $24 or $111 per person. Now, I do have to qualify that the number that was given to me by the City Parks and Recreation Director includes the dollars spent on the cemetery. It's not just Parks and Recreation dollars there. That budget includes the maintenance of the cemetery, which equates to $330,000 of their budget, and I will show that in detail. So in conclusions that we draw from this analysis, that the Grand Traverse County residents are spending over $3.6 million currently for Parks and Recreation facilities and maintenance and programs. 3 townships do not have any local parks. 6 townships do not have a Parks and Recreation Commission or committee. 2 townships have elected Parks and Recreation Commissions. There are 102 local parks, totaling 6,507 acres. There are 29 full-time, 96 part-time recreation and recreation maintenance employees within Grand Traverse County working in 11 different municipalities. The average Parks and Recreation budget for the townships is $59,000, including Acme and Garfield, who are acquiring property. When we pull those 2 out, the average is about almost $29,000 per township for Parks and Recreation. The range of the current annual budget for Parks and Recreation is from 0 to $300,000 per township. 4 townships contribute money to Civic Center South within the village of Kingsley, and they are Paradise, Fife Lake, Mayfield, and Union Townships. 2 villages have an average budget of Parks and Recreation, and this number changed. And I have to please recognize that this is a constant work in progress. These numbers will constantly change as people give me new information. Kingsley, late yesterday afternoon, updated their information. So the average budget now is $24,000 between the 2 villages. As you see on your spreadsheet, Kingsley, I believe, is $31,000, and the village of Fife Lake is $17,000 being spent on Parks and Recreation and maintenance. Yes, sir.
I don't mean to get you in the middle of your presentation, but so of those dollar amounts for Kingsley and Fife Lake, I take it a pretty good chunk of that is going to support Civic Center South?
It is, obviously, Kingsley is all of Civic Center South. The Fife Lake Village is contributing money to local parks within their area.
Okay, as well as supporting.
Well, the Fife Lake Township is contributing money towards Civic Center South.
Oh, but not the village, not the village. Okay, I'm sorry, thank you.
Sure. The City of Traverse City has the highest amount budgeted for Parks and Recreation at $1.6 million, and as I indicated, earlier, of that $1.6 million, $330,000 is for the cemetery maintenance, leaving over $1.2 million for Parks and Recreation. That equates to about 8% of their annual budget for Parks and Recreation. When they add the cemetery into it, it totals 11%, as the spreadsheet shows. Just want to make sure you have that ability to compare in that knowledge base. Grand Traverse County has the second highest amount budget for Parks and Recreation at $1.2 million. Traverse City and Garfield Township Park Authority operates on a $151,000 budget, funded over a voter-approved millage of .0994 mils through the year 2023. So in considerations, where could this go? What's this information? My personal reason for doing this on my own presenting this to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the county board and any other municipality who would like to see this combined information, is to at least start considering the possibility of some regional approaches in the future for recreation needs. Could there be a recreation park authority that works more regionally? Something that I would like to suggest, at least discussions take place to consider at some point. The dollars amount being spent today are large. Will they continue to be that large in the future? We all know how tight the budgets are, and we have a constituency within our community that expect a certain level of service for Parks and Recreation. And how we can accommodate that in the future may lead to us to a change in the future in how we provide those services. And so my personal reason for doing this analysis was, one, to determine how many dollars are being spent today and what percentage of the budgets are those, and how does that compare throughout the community? And two, is that an opportunity as a starting point to at least discuss the potential of maybe changing the approach for recreation services in the community in the future? Civic Center South has a combined effort of several townships in the village. They are currently talking about a possible recreation authority. Whether that will happen or not remains to be seen, but at least they're in the discussion stages, recognizing that they're trying to provide services for a large number of area people within a given area beyond what the county provides. And the county, Grand Traverse County Parks and Recreation Commission, has no parks in the southern end of the county, not a one.
But interestingly enough, the city of Traverse City has a rather large park in the south part of the county.
That's true.
Which is, of course, available to all residents of the county.
That's right. And all the county parks are available to all residents of the community, absolutely. And one of the other aspects that I'm putting forth is considerations I've suggested to Parks and Recreation Commission, and I'm informing you as well, is should there be consideration of doing a recreation workshop, getting all the Parks and Recreation Commissions from the various municipalities and entities within the county together at a common goal of starting discussions of how we can help each other provide services. Because we all compete for the same federal dollars and state dollars for recreation facilities and programs. So I would be happy to try and answer any questions you may have regarding this research. Yes, sir.
Yesterday, I had just a brief conversation with Commissioner Max Bauer. I think we were both relating some of the experiences we have with other local communities that we're aware of that have coordinated efforts with their school system, where they have, basketball in the evening. They are, there's some kind of coordinated effort to use facilities that the public schools have to help the recreational needs of the community. And in some cases, there's, joint ventures, and there's all kinds of cooperative type things that go on. And it seems as though that, when you take a look at recreation as a whole in our community, we've got, for the whole summer, these schools are closed down and,
Or empty.
And, you have, what do we do? You get all these ball diamonds, you got, whatever availability they have in the school system for recreation. Seems that, at some point in time, we should bring the school systems to the table with this discussion, and maybe we can put something together, that would benefit the community, because the public is paying for those facilities as well. So, so how do we maximize that effort?
That's right. And currently, the city of Traverse City does do some of their recreation programming for basketball and volleyball, et cetera, utilizing local schools, and that's within the elementary schools within the city. And that's the only one that I'm aware of as far as an active, continuing operating recreation program utilizing school facilities.
Yeah, you were aware of other communities. I think you spoke with me on
Yeah,
stuff.
Garden City was one. They've had it for decades, where they have a joint program.
Jason, do you have a? Would you come to the mic, please?
To have local parks and recreation departments working with schools is a very common practice, whether it's Garden City, Oxford Township, or any well-established parks and recreation department. Being a parks and recreation department, we have several outdoor facilities that the schools frankly don't have, but the schools have a lot of indoor facilities that we don't. So I had a conversation actually last week with a couple athletic directors in regards to utilizing some of their facilities and, having us take on some programs, as long as we could run it in their facility, to help out with some of the latchkey with the latchkey kids for after-school programs, with summer programs, and just to get kids more active. They want to sit down and have a conversation about that. Furthermore, talking about a Parks and Recreation Authority, right now, Parks and Recreation authorities can include counties, townships, villages, and cities. There is Bill, I think, 222 of 2009. It's in the State House right now that will allow school districts to also join Parks and Recreation authorities and create a stronger bond between local parks and recreation providers and utilizing facilities in the school district. That's an issue that's kind of stalled in our state legislature right now, but it is a tool that would be very beneficial for us if we're looking towards a recreation authority. It'd help bridge a historic gap that's existed between the schools and the county parks and rec departments.
Sonny?
Well, I think one thing, and Russ knows, I've complained for years that we can't have a Parks and Recreation inventory unless we include the public schools, because the taxpayers are paying for those. And, the schools are made available to the communities, even though they aren't done through the Parks and Recreation Committee, but they always come with a cost. I personally paid out of my pocket for a long time to use Westwoods Elementary when my kids were, in junior high and things, to run a basketball program and different programs during the winter time for the kids in the community. But, those facilities need to be part of our recreational inventory. I absolutely am adamant about that. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And we have some townships that are very actively promoting the recreation. I was at Long Lake Township's meeting last night, and they approved the next bond payment on the property they bought at Cedar Creek, or Cedar Run Creek. They also just recently purchased, I believe it's 120 acres of property, which is in Benzie County, but it's adjacent to the Cedar Run Creek quiet area, the nature area that they've purchased. So, there are townships that are very actively promoting this. Whether or not they're going to have money long-term to maintain it or to develop it, who knows? They have budget constraints just like all the rest of us. And, if there's a way that we can jointly help that, or come up with some economics of scale, it makes sense, so.
And Chris?
Well, a couple of things I just wanted to note on the spreadsheet, and that is, Russ did use the total municipal budget of $147 million, and as we all know, we do not have $147 million of discretionary money to spend. That is not our budget. And if you do take a look at what we spend versus our general fund budget, it really is closer to 3%. So I really think Grand Traverse County is doing well in that regard. The other thing, and I just found it interesting this morning, I'm working on a spreadsheet in preparation for the Parks Board, because we, of course, are going to be, we've been charged by this board to review the budget. And I was looking at it this morning. In 2009, we paid $213,000 in utility costs for our parks. Heat, light, water, and when I include utilities, I'm including like waste disposal, things like that. That's not to mention the money for building improvements. That's not to mention Danny Brown's staff time that is devoted to park maintenance, and a great deal of his staff time is devoted to park maintenance. I was talking to him this morning. Paul Johnson just came back from an MRPA conference, and that was a $500 conference, and Paul is required by law, in order to work on playground equipment, which we have in Grand Traverse County, to be certified. And he has to go and be certified. Danny said he thought it's like once every 3 years, but nevertheless, that's staff time. So truly, I think Grand Traverse County is doing a good job funding their parks.
Ross?
First of all, Russ, I'd like to say, thank you for putting this all together, because it really does, provide a lot of information that we sort of have a sense of, but, didn't really have it in one place. I would like you to look at column 14, though. I think maybe some of the numbers there are, I was particularly looking at the City of Traverse City people-to-park ratio, and I ran a couple of the other ratios last night, and they weren't coming out right, so you might just want to, see how those numbers are generated and, make sure they're accurate. Because
Okay.
I think that Traverse City number should be quite a bit higher, and I would certainly agree with Commissioner Max Bauer's comment about, looking at our $40 million general fund budget instead of, everything with the road commission and the pavilions and all that other stuff that we don't have any particular control over, so. But other than that, I'd say, great job, and thank you for this.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
Could I just, a quick comment, an opinion? It was probably 2002 that I was asked to speak to the Chamber of Commerce, and I talked to them about the need to bring local units together to consolidate service delivery in a way that would save money for taxpayers or maybe avoid future costs. And I know the county board feels strongly about that. And I'll just use this as an example. I talked about that over the years and was a little chagrined to have the announcement of the city Garfield Township Authority developed after I had spent months and months talking with the city manager about combining parks and recreation programs, and they went off and kind of did it in a different way. My point of this is that's just one example. I think, Russ, your idea of bringing everybody together is a good idea, but I'm skeptical about their willingness to combine service delivery on local municipality efforts. I think what really has to be looked at here is public involvement, chamber involvement, business involvement. Those people who are paying the bill are going to have to be the ones who demand that we look at this, because I don't know that the municipalities alone will be successful. We don't have a very good track record of that at this point anyway. So I think that somehow I think it's a great idea to bring them together to start sharing those ideas, but at some point, I think the public has to be engaged in this, because I do think that's the only solution we have. I always use the example, and it's not a perfect example, of our lifeguards and the lifeguards the city hires for the summer, and, our busy times are the winters, and, why are we doing this? Why can't we look at the issue of how can we hire them together? There may be, and I know there are a lot of other issues like that, so I appreciate everything you did. I think it's really good work. And I think that, as Commissioner Max Bauer said, it's really, at this point, or maybe Commissioner Wheelock, but it's cost avoidance. There are going to be costs, and everybody's buying up this land and building these park systems. Can they continue to afford to operate them? That's the question. And so anyway, I appreciate you doing it, and I think it's a good idea to start by bringing them all together.
So is your skepticism kind of a parallel observation to like the recycling program situation?
Or the septic treatment program?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just wondering. Okay.
Yep, it is.
touche.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, yeah. And now we have the administration report.
The first item is just an update from Bob and Georgia on the issue with the Commission on Aging Millage Committee, and I'll turn it over to Bob. And Georgia. Why don't you come up, Georgia, in case there's any questions? I didn't know who wanted to speak about this. Are you going to, Bob?
How much?
Georgia will.
Chime in here.
Good morning. Georgia Durga, Director, Grand Traverse County Commission on Aging. And I'm here today because last week at Public Health and Safety, we talked about the issue of our millage committee and minutes being taken by our staff for the millage committee. So yesterday I sat down with Bob to decide what resolution we needed to, what things we need to address. And he put together a resolution that I'll be presenting to our board tonight. We have our annual meeting tonight, so this afternoon, so we'll be talking about it there. But as part of the resolution, in fact, I have a copy. Would that probably be?
That's fine.
I brought a copy.
Let me pass it out for you.
And what we talked about was that we did have the millage as part of our strategic plan, so we're going to amend our strategic plan There were 2 items in it that will be deleted, and one in Goal 2 and one in Goal 3. Employees of the Commission on Aging shall not use or authorize use of funds, personnel, office space, property, stationery, postage, volunteer, personal services to further the passage or defeat of a ballot question. And I just wanted to point out, the only thing that we used there was a clerk to take the minutes for the meetings. There were no other resources, and the stationery and everything that goes with taking minutes. There was no other resources used from the Commission on Aging. They have a separate fund held at a bank. We have a separate treasurer. We have co-chair. So everything else was separate but that. And we did that because we thought we had to under the Open Meetings Act. Employees of the Commission on Aging shall be prohibited from meeting with any ballot question committee during regular business hours of the Commission on Aging. Commission on Aging board members and employees of the Commission on Aging are prohibited from receiving per diem, mileage, or expenses of any kind for attendance to meetings of any ballot question committee. And Commission on Aging facilities shall not be used by any ballot question committee. And then we did, in regard to the clerk taking minutes, we reimbursed the county. Yesterday, actually, the campaign committee reimbursed Grand Traverse County Commission on Aging for those expenses, which were here somewhere. For the staff, the IT costs, which were the use of the computer, equipment costs, supplies, and mail, the total cost was $575.63. So, and that went to the Finance Department yesterday. And we will be revising our strategic plan, but that will take action by our board.
And then the last thing, so that's kind of the action plan, and thank Bob for his help working with Georgia and doing this. We're going to have Bob review the whole package at the very end to make sure we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's, and then hopefully Bob will give us, his blessing that everything has been taken care of appropriately, and then we can move on. And clearly, we've learned from this, and we'll make sure that it does not happen again. Any questions from board members?
Just specifically, number 4, Commission on Aging board members and employees of the Commission on Aging are prohibited from receiving per diem, mileages, or expenses of any kind for attendance to meetings, any ballot question committee. I guess it's not expressly written in here, but the assumption is from the county, correct? Obviously, if the friends of whoever, whatever, any ballot members choose to do whatever they want to do with their commission members, say if Georgia was a member of that and they were, that's up to them. That's on their private time.
Yeah, I would assume so. I don't think they do any of that, but,
No.
but yes, this is talking about county money.
Yep, okay.
And that's receive and file type of thing?
Yep. Thank you both. Did you have anything to add, Bob?
Well, I guess, Georgia talked about what was going on as, that was inappropriate, was that Commission on Aging staff were taking minutes. But the problem here is that what we had is an actual committee of the Commission on Aging set up to promote the millage. And I think that's where the confusion comes in, because there's a separate ballot question committee that it was filed with the clerk's office, and it's appropriate for them to raise money with private funds to promote the millage. I know a lot of the people that are involved in the Commission on Aging and that were part of that committee were both supporting the Friends of the Commission on Aging, but they were also part of this county committee. And I think the confusion came in, well, are we part of the ballot question committee, or are we part of the Commission on Aging committee? I think there was even confusion in George's mind about that. And the things that we came up with in this resolution, they go a little bit beyond what's required by law, I will say, not a whole lot, but for example, number 3, number 5 prohibits the ballot question committee from meeting at the Commission on Aging facility. And that's not actually required. There is an exception in the law that as long as you make the public facility open to persons of differing viewpoints on a ballot question, that would be acceptable. The problem is when you have the Commission on Aging Committee meeting, or I'm sorry, the ballot question committee meeting at the Commission of Aging on Aging building, and you've got all the same people that are part of the Commission on Aging, or most of the same people. There's this confusion, I think, that's built into that, you know, are we the ballot question committee or are we the Commission on Aging committee? And so we've added that provision. I think George has been talking about maybe going to Horizon Bookstore if the Friends of the Commission on Aging ballot question committee are going to get together. And that way we logically and physically separate the two identities here, because it is confusing, and hopefully this will prevent some of the problems that I think we had here.
Isn't number 3 a little bit the same way? I mean, just more for clarification, because obviously if you have a committee, say for example there was a committee, say that didn't overlap between employees and board members, 5 separate people from the community who were pushing a ballot initiative as a separate committee, they could obviously come in and ask the director to have a meeting with them so they could gain facts about the Commission on Aging or the millage as well. So that's not necessarily necessary, but this
I would say it goes beyond, because suppose an employee wanted to use their lunch hour to go meet with a ballot question committee. Again, I think you get into that confusing situation. What are we doing? Are we meeting as the Commission on Aging, or are we meeting as the ballot question committee? And so, again, to physically separate, you know, this is after hours. If Georgia wants to spend her time after hours working on this ballot question committee, she can do that as long as she's expending her own resources. But so I think number 3 also goes a little beyond what the statute necessarily requires, but now you're getting into, again, that physical separation. If you're going to do this, it's going to be outside of county regular business hours.
Okay, I think we've covered that. Can we move on to...
Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia. Thank you, Bob. The next item is just an update on the appointments of boards and committees, and I asked you to contact Chris to hold interviews. Now, one additional thing, I think that at the township meeting last week, hosted by the Road Commission, they took some action to make some recommendations of the rural representative on the Board of Public Works. And there's a letter, I think, coming from that. Several of you were there, so that's really just for information. Please contact Chris to get a meeting set up.
I had a question about this.
Yes.
What do our rules say about what a rural township representative is?
There is no definition of rural township representative in our rules.
Okay.
We've had this discussion several times before. Chris was listening, so she's ran down the stairs to be here for this. Come on in, have a seat.
She's not going to say she had us on mute for the first.
Bob
started talking
They have it on in the computer upstairs while we're down here in case, I get in trouble. They run down to bail me out. The question, Chris, was, what do we have in terms of a definition under the Board of Public Works about what a rural representative is?
We do not have a definition.
Yeah, it's been discussed in the past, what does that entail? And I think historically, it's always been those townships that are not part of the sewer and water group has been considered rural, but there is no defined
answer. So do we have a resolution that just says a rural township representative, and that's as far as it goes?
Actually, when the Board of Public Works is, or the board is set up and their makeup is defined, what makes up their board, that it says rural township representative. And in the past, it has always been assumed, as long as I can remember, that it's not part of the sewer and water district. And the Township Association has always given us recommendations for that.
Okay, have we advertised this publicly as well?
We have never done that because we asked the Township the Township Association for recommendations. They ask within their township group if there's anybody that,
But theoretically, anyone who lives in one of those rural townships
could serve.
Absolutely,
Could serve.
right.
Because we're not.
But it's actually done through the Township Association. We don't usually go out and do that. But
That's
we
how-
can. That's how
yes.
we've done it historically.
And I will tell you that at the Township Association meeting last week, Commissioner Max Bauer and Wheelock.
Richardson.
And me.
And you were there, thank you, and which is probably why you're asking the question. They were asking whether they should do it or not.
I couldn't tell if they were being cute or not, but two of the names on the list didn't act like they really had any interest in being on the Board of Public Works.
Correct, that you're correct. And I think there was some ambiguity on part of the group whether or not they should make an appointment, or at least it seemed that way to me.
I mean, perhaps we should, we should advertise, for a representative from, one of the specified townships.
We can do that. That's why I put that on there.
And for the commissioners who were not in attendance at that meeting, Commissioner Richardson is exactly right. Paul Biondo and Karen Rosa did not want to serve. And Glenn Lyle requested that anyone interested in serving email him. So, I don't know if he's received names
And I believe,
or not.
Commissioners, help me with this. I recall they did not recommend Marv Radke.
No, they did not. They said if anyone's interested in serving, email.
Yeah, I got a strong sense that Marv Radke said, if you,
You can't find
I
anybody
don't really want
else.
to do it if you can't find anybody else.
I'll do it.
but,
That's what I heard as well, but.
I think he's ready to get off.
And Glenn did receive emails from Pat Paul and Marv Radke saying they were interested.
Okay.
And then there's even a question whether Pat Paul is technically a rural representative. I mean,
That's true.
they're sort of betwixt and between on that one.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, 'cause
Can
he
we
is part of that
advertise?
district.
Well, I think originally the rural township definition would have been not necessarily sewer and water, because it goes back further than that. I think if you look at the rural fire department, and that they consider themselves the rural townships that still sit on the rural township fire board. That's rural, and then you had metro, which were the other ones, and then peninsula is an independent.
Yeah, I would suggest that Commissioner Richardson's comment should lead to perhaps a greater or a better definition of what rural means. I think that's appropriate. It'll clarify things down the road, certainly. I would suggest that if you want to go out and advertise, that's totally fine to do it, but as a courtesy, I would suggest you let the Michigan Township Association know that you're intending to do that, because right now I think they're still taking responsibility for making recommendations, and I'd at least want them to know that, we've decided to expand it so we can get more interest,
Well, I think one thing you have to remember, this was a rural township designated position. We have citizens at large positions on this board already. So if you're going to advertise it thinking that you're going to get general citizens to apply, I believe the idea was that you had a member of a rural township board representative on that board.
That's what the
you're not
ideal-
going to get if you do a Record Eagle advertisement for someone that lives in those townships. We have citizens at large positions on the board already.
That is correct, and I think Commissioner Wheelock is probably, it's not defined. It's not defined, but I think clearly that was the intent.
I believe that was the intent.
Because that's why there are designated citizen at-large members.
But the question remains, were the members of the Long Lake Board asked if they would like to serve? Were the members of the Green Lake Board asked if they would like to serve? I didn't hear that.
I'm sorry, there's a difference between, going out to the Record Eagle and even going to the MTA meeting. We could send a letter to each of the township
boards.
trustees in those townships.
So
But
are
we
you
go back to, there's not really a definition, and it's the intent, and I realize that we like to stray from policies or not have them at all and use the intent instead, but perhaps we should develop one here.
I agree. And I also think it's a good idea, it would be a good idea to send a
And
letter
again,
to each township board member.
I'm not in any way saying that, one of these individuals should not be appointed. It just seemed like, again, from my experience at this meeting last week, that they were having a hard time coming up with anybody who was even interested. And,
But, and some of those township trustees might be, but they just weren't at that MTA meeting.
That's right.
That's it. It was just sort of disorganized and off the cuff, if you will. So,
This is kind of a social club.
but yet, we're
But
making,
it-
look at all the activity around the Board of Public Works. This is
But
sort of
Marv-
an important,
Marv was put on the Board of Public Works by them
I
as their
understand.
representative,
Can do it.
and he does sit on the town board.
Chris, might I suggest that we draft a letter and send it to those designated rural townships, asking if they have any interest in being a representative on the, or if any of their members be interested in serving on the Board of Public Works.
And
That's a great idea. Who are the rural townships?
Well, Bruce, I was just going to make a motion that we direct staff to supply us by, the regular board meeting this month? Would that be fine?
Sure.
An appropriate definition for rural townships with respect to the Board of Public Works.
well, what the rural township representative is.
Yes, yes.
We need both.
I'll
What's
support.
the representative, what's a
Urban.
real township?
Urban and rural.
Was that a motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll support.
Yeah, we got to do that.
Okay, I have a motion to support. Any further discussion?
What's the motion?
What's the motion?
To direct staff to define what a rural township is, and if there's any representatives that'd like to represent it.
Well, no, I thought we were going to define what a rural township representative was as well as
First.
a rural township.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
define it and then send the
And then,
notification out.
and then invite.
Yeah.
All right. Is that
I
clear?
always assumed it was the townships that aren't on the DPW.
Well, that might be a way we define it.
Well, except we all know there's a number of townships that aren't represented on the Board of Public Works.
I'd
Can't
like
represent them all.
to,
Because
what
they're
I'll do
not
is
part
I'll
of it.
work with Ross Ross Childs, and we will come up with a definition for you, for your consideration at the board meeting. It'll be in the packet.
Okay, Ross?
has got it.
Chairman, I can give you the background when it was first established.
Well, come to
Use the mic that's right off of it, Russ.
He's still in mourning over the Red Wings.
When that was first changed from having all the Board of Supervisors on the Board of Public Works, it was a rural township representative. And we asked the Rural Townships Association at that time to recommend their appointment. And that's the way it was set up when it was initially established.
But what was a rural township, Ross?
Rural townships were any of the townships that were not part of the Board of Public Works at the time, which was the 5 townships. And Blair was still a rural township at that time.
So we have an essential definition.
We don't have it in writing, it's not memorialized anyplace.
Oh.
And I'll give you one that you can memorialize if you choose to.
Okay,
And
memorialized.
Except that all the townships belong to the Township Association.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
But they all don't actively participate. That's what I found in being there.
Yeah, most of the rural ones don't.
Ross?
So, I understand this isn't part of this motion, but in terms of asking for, a representative to serve, do we want to direct it to the individual townships, or do we want to direct it to the MTA to make a recommendation to us?
Well, my suggestion at this point would be to
Or both.
call Glenn Lyle and suggest that we will consider the people that he has forwarded the names on, but that we intend to send it to all of the representatives of all the rural townships and give it a month to allow people to also put their names in for anybody who wasn't there.
Okay. All right, everybody understand the motion? Mm-hmm. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the same? Motion carries. Okay, now we can go on to number 2.2.
This is on my administrator contract.
Well, no, the updates to appointments.
No, you got Commissioner
do that?
Aging and Northern Lights.
Oh, I see where.
The other two are just updates for information.
So-
And the Commission on Aging and Parks and Rec interviews are going to be held on next Wednesday, May 19th. I'm in the process of scheduling those. And
Did we establish a time, Chris?
1 to 3.
For a subcommittee meeting?
That's the interview committee.
And Chris, thanks for scheduling all that. Trying to get the applicants and the commissioners is like herding cats, and so I know it's pretty hard.
That's what we do. He does that all the time if he does.
With or without cat licenses.
Maybe it'd
Okay.
be easier then.
Larry, have a comment?
When you're to the administrator contract, if I could make the opening remarks.
I believe we are.
Chris.
Are we at that point?
Make sure,
Yes.
Chris, make sure you're still listening in case I need you to come back down.
Now we are moving on to administrator contract.
Mr. Chairman, you have in your packet a draft contract and a cover memo that basically outlines the summary of the meeting that occurred on Tuesday, April 20th at 2 p.m. with Commissioner Stepka, Fleece, myself, and Dennis Aloya, and Commissioner Stepka, and Thomas. Thank you. And we didn't put Thomas in here, did we?
Yeah.
All right. And so we wanted to give you a kind of a summary memo of how the meeting went, some of our rationale in terms of our recommendations. Subsequent to putting it in the packet, we wanted to make sure that we had a review from Bob Cooney and El Schneider on the language of the contract, make sure it complies with any legislative statutes. We were subsequently advised by Bob Cooney, who reported to Dennis and myself, and I had indicated to the committee members, that there was a question regarding the issue of the term of the contract and how it applies to the legislative law regarding county administrator contracts in Michigan. And so the information in the memo in terms of options isn't really applicable at this point in time, that at least the initial review by Mr. Cooney is that his office is suggesting that the term of the contract would be a 3-year fixed, and that the board would have an opportunity during the 3rd year to renegotiate the contract again with the administrator. So in all fairness to the committee and to Dennis, I'm going to make a recommendation that we send back to the committee, the original committee of Thomas, Stepka, myself, and Fleece, to again meet with Dennis Aloya and with the assistance of Bob Cooney, and make sure that we clearly understand the requirements of how we should lay out the term of a contract for the county administration position, and that we have the proper language to deal with how we would address the renewal of such a contract in terms of how that would occur and how that would proceed with the Board of Commissioners on the 3rd year. And there are other items that are listed in the memo and in the draft contract that Dennis would like to come back and have a discussion with the committee about. And I know one of them is the proposed termination severance in terms of length. So at this time, I don't, as a spokesman for the committee, don't feel comfortable in making a recommendation at this time, and that I would feel more comfortable going back and doing it right in terms of the particular language that Mr. Cooney would help assist us on in the contract, and then really having, again, a second discussion with our administrator regarding some of the changes that we were looking at from his current contract to a proposed draft contract. So we want to make sure that we haven't missed anything, and that we all have a comfort level in terms of, some of the things that we want to recommend back to the board. And so with that, I guess that would be my report, unless anybody has any questions. But I would like to make a recommendation that we refer back to the committee, original committee, the contract and the cover memo, and that it would be our hope that we could report back, hopefully by the Ways and Means Committee, but if not, if we can't schedule something soon enough, that we would definitely come back and report and give you plenty of time in terms of notice for our board meeting at the end of May.
Larry?
Yes.
I'd make the motion that we would refer the draft administrator's contract back to the subcommittee to review the different terms of the contract. As well, I was ask the committee to provide any supporting documentation for the basis of their recommendations.
Support.
Larry, I think you're running the meeting at this particular point in case you're curious. I believe you're running the meeting right now because Bruce stepped out, so.
Oh. All right. Is there any more discussion on the motion?
In terms of supporting documentation,
The only thing the reason I threw that in is when I first read the memo, and I appreciated it, but it said, these are the kinds of contracts that we're seeing, and I'm going, okay, great, that's you telling me this in the memo, and I appreciate that, but I'm guessing that you made that statement based upon some information that you saw or reviewed, and that's the type of the information that I'd like to see.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you'll make those same statements when you come back, but if you do, provide any of that, please.
I guess a footnote on that is that to help Dennis approach the board or the committee in terms of what's kind of the more common contracts for county administrators. And we did expand it to city managers and executive directors for state associations, for like Michigan Association of Counties, for example, and other folks. Some of those discussions were privileged to the extent that, Dennis was able to receive information on other contracts, but was not given permission to release those contracts to other people. Now, technically, those contracts are probably FOIA-able, but, I think in all fairness to Dennis, in his discussions with other folks that he was able to get copies of contracts from, he did not receive permission from them to release those to anybody other than himself. So, he's just relating back to us what he has seen in terms of other contracts that he was aware of in the public sector, both for county administrators and other administrators in publicly funded situations.
Ross? Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you're looking for input or not. I do have a real problem with the 24 months termination severance, which I've already expressed to Dennis, as well as some other people. As far as the contracts that, were being used to support the idea that length of severance was typical, I have trouble imagining that public contracts are not public record, wherever they are. However, there is a wealth of information available on the internet, as in various parts of the country and so forth, and I would certainly, suggest that, for those of us who have that interest, we can certainly find out. And my final comment is that the city manager of Traverse City just signed a new contract last summer, and he has 6 months severance in his contract.
Yeah. Just to make a remark on that, if I could, based on our review, the 24-month contract was not consistent with other contracts that Dennis was aware of. It was more consistent in the 12-month area, but I think the administrator was hoping for a minimum of a 2-year commitment by this board moving forward. I mean, his desire, and he has expressed to the committee his desire to stay here and make this his final kind of tenure as a county administrator. He's in the, I don't know, his approximate age is 55 or somewhere in that area, and he'd like to follow through until retirement age. So that was just a point in discussion. I think we could readdress that issue when we do go back at the county level. Some contracts don't have severance languages in them. They just, for example, would be a 3-year contract. So if one was to be let go, during that 3-year contract, the board would have to just pay out the remaining part of the contract. So in some cases, it could be up to 2 years.
Okay, Dennis, did you have something to add?
Oh, no, I just wanted to reiterate, I've never said that 24 months was standard in any of the contracts I've seen. I was asking for more than what I've seen in contracts, so
Yeah.
I
Okay, well-
want to be clear on that. I wasn't trying to deceive anybody on that.
Sounds like we have a motion on the floor for one thing, and it's going to be all fluid, and this is moving on, and if you want, I think, any further comment? We've already been here for 2 hours, going on 3, it looks like, before. I think we can move us on, have a vote.
Commissioner
and Chris can
Messler
make
has a
comment to the committee level, subcommittee level. All right?
You're all set? Okay.
We have a motion on the floor, let's call it. All those in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Opposed, the same? Okay. Now let's move on to administrator update.
I'll try to be quick with this. We received finally yesterday a letter back from Mr. Peterson regarding his equipment removal, and he's indicating that he prefers not to remove the equipment, and he thinks he met the terms of some kind of verbal agreement that he says he had with me, which he had no verbal agreement with me. We sent him a letter telling him to remove the equipment. I am bringing that back to you next week. I've given it to the attorney, and the attorney has suggested that if there is equipment that we want, that we should send him another letter asking him for the cost of purchasing it. We're talking trash rakes. But I'm bringing it back to you because he has some idea that the county board has changed their position on this and that you don't want that equipment removed. And I told him I had no indication of that, but I'm bringing it back to show you next week, his letter, so you can see it and either reaffirm to get that stuff out of there or to, or if you've had a change of heart. But I have to push this issue with him. And, you know, to be quite honest about it, what you're going to hear is, why now? Well, it hasn't been why now. It's been 6 months, and we got the critical stuff out. We got the turbines out of Boardman, which avoid the flooding issue, and that was a critical piece, but he still has that a lot of other equipment in there. And so I'm just going to bring you that letter, and I wanted to tell you that. You know...
Just a second.
I'm sorry.
Did everybody get a copy of that letter from...
Norb Tutlis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Asking you for a decision on
Yeah.
whether or not you're going to put a referendum on the ballot.
Oh, we can't do that.
Well, I have asked Bob Cooney, right after that meeting, I asked Bob to review the legality of such a referendum, and Bob, I talked to him this morning, he's in the middle of that review, and that it's not as simple as what we all, or some of us thought it was.
If he wants to, he can petition for one, but...
Yeah, is there a citizen-driven referendum process?
That's what I'm trying to research right now, and I guess, you know, I'm not at a comfort level where I'm willing to say that there's no chance that you could put it out to the voters. I'm kind of coming to that conclusion, but I'm not comfortable stating at this point you can't.
My question is, we got the letter, and he expects an answer.
As soon as Bob gives us an opinion, we're going to give him an answer.
Okay, because, you know, my answer is file a lawsuit.
Yeah.
We've made our decision, and I don't see any reason to bring it back up.
Obviously, if the law doesn't allow us to have such a referendum, that's our answer, and that's what we'll give him back. And so it's going to take it'll take a few more days, Dick, but I
Okay.
hope to have it in the next week or
All
so.
right.
And
I didn't
we'll
feel
get
like
that.
writing a letter today anyway.
Okay, and Larry, please, you have a comment?
Well, the only comment I got, similar to Dick, this board's already made our decision. We want the equipment out, and staff needs to proceed with that.
Yeah.
And if he can't remove it, I'm sure that staff can arrange for the removal of it.
Yep, we've actually already talked about getting quotes to have the equipment removed, and George is in the process of getting the quotes to have the equipment removed. And then if we're put in that position, we will remove it, and he will, and then we'll take him to court to get the money.
Price of scrap was cut in half last week. You should have done it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Any further comment?
I want to make it clear that there's no right to a referendum in this case. This isn't like an ordinance that you passed, and so there's a public right to referendum. Even if it was an ordinance, the time has passed for that. The question that was put to me is it possible, if this board wanted to put this out there as a referendum for the...
Well, we can save you the time right now and vote on it.
Yeah, the board didn't ask for that opinion.
No.
Yeah.
We've already made our decision.
Yeah, my only question is whether there's this, a citizen can create a referendum question.
Yeah, but they're non-binding.
Well, I was trying to answer the other question, could the county board, because I didn't believe the county board could even have a referendum on a millage. I was trying to answer that question as
I just
well.
Well, should we
If
have
the
a
board is
motion?
telling me they're not even interested in that, and you want to make a motion to that effect,
You know,
I'm fine with
well,
that.
As long as Bob's already got most of the work done, let's let him finish, and
Yeah.
we'll have an answer to the question.
I'd feel safer getting an answer from
Yeah,
Bob
but what I
first.
find preposterous is we have one individual, actually two individuals, that's causing this discussion, and the board made their actions. We've not had any second thoughts. We need to move forward.
There's more like 6 or 8 individuals, right?
All right, we'll bring you an answer next week on that, hopefully. Next thing is, you recall Jamel told us that we won the lawsuit on cell phone surcharges, which allows us to take our cell phone surcharge from the 66 cents that we were collecting to 80 cents, which we had proposed. That still it was appealed to the appeals court, and we won at the appeals court. The state still has the right to appeal it to the state Supreme Court, and they have, I think, another 30 or 40 days to make that decision. So we're still on hold until that's done. The question remains, if they don't appeal it, how in the world do you go back and collect money for the last 2 years? And I don't know that that's a possibility.
No, I just go forward.
And I don't, and the state has no idea what they're going to do about that. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Also, the study that we've participated in with the regional Homeland Security Grant has made a recommendation on how we should proceed at looking at consolidating 911 centers, and I'm going to make a copy of the executive summary for all of you today. It'll be in your mailboxes, and if you want to see the full study, I'll have it in the office for you to review. Generally, what that says is that they're suggesting that we start with virtual consolidation. In other words, get all the equipment to be the same in the 3 communities, and then look at consolidating further down the road. So I will get that to you. I'm pleased to announce that we have a tentative agreement with the district court Teamsters unit. And I will be bringing that hopefully to you at Ways and Means next week. I understand that next week the unit will vote on the contract, and then, of course, if we're successful, I'll talk to you about the terms next week, and hopefully, if they approve the agreement, we'll be able to bring you a contract for your consideration at the end of the month. So I wanted to let you know that. The Siegel Committee is working still. You'll see in the notes, we're now starting to put announcements of meetings on your agenda as well, so you know that. They have another meeting this Thursday at 3 p.m. It's been moved from Monday, or excuse me, from Tuesday. And they still intend to have a report to you by the end of the month.
That was moved up, wasn't it?
I think they're trying to aggressively move those meetings to try to get this done, so that you have some answers. I met with Senator Levin's staff last week, and we went over the possibility of an emergency, an EOC grant from the state, or from the federal government, and the possibility of getting some federal money to help with an EOC facility that would be part of our health department expansion if we decide to move forward with that, and they're investigating that on our behalf. We are also in the process of doing an evaluation, Dean and I, with staff on the pool budget in terms of the cost and revenue. Some of the Lutra study recommendations have been incorporated. Some of the bigger ones that are the money savers have not. Some of them relate to union issues and other issues. And we are trying to evaluate at this point in time how we're doing financially in that pool, and we're in the middle of that review, and we'll be back to talk to you about that probably at the June meeting. Also, today I'll be meeting with the jail staff to talk about the new medical program. Remember, we eliminated our nursing positions and our doctor, and we hired a firm on a contract to do that. That's been operating since March. So we're going to get the initial review today and get an idea of how that's going. I think I reported to you already. We gave the opportunity to the nurses to move over to that contract, and none of them took us up on that. So they brought in new employees to run that, and I'm kind of anxious to see how that's working for us. So I'll have a report for you soon on that. And then lastly, I just want to mention this just in passing. After this meeting, if you get a second, we'll walk into the big meeting room. Has anybody seen the tree that went down in the storm this weekend?
No.
Wait till you see this tree. It's one of our huge trees, and I mean, it's split into multiple pieces. It's going to be about $3,000 to remove. It's falling into the river. And so that's just, something that you might enjoy seeing as a curiosity. It's kind of cool.
Cut it up about that long, I'll take it.
What's that?
Cut it up about that long, I'll take it.
And that's all I have.
Okay.
There's one thing, I think maybe the Coast Guard has at least one of their new helicopters that they've been pushing for, because I heard one out my way and it was a Coast Guard machine, and it's a lot different than the others, so. I think they've got at least one of them, although this might have been something. And I haven't heard. Has anybody heard whether they got them or not?
No.
Well, I got a bunch of Coast Guard guys living out on the peninsula. I'll ask one of them. One's a pilot, actually.
Well, it's gonna be a great thing when they get them.
Steady stream.
Because these little birds they've got can't fly in icy weather.
Okay, let's move on to unfinished business. Okay. Board rules, this is coming in for you guys.
Just a second, Bob is looking for it.
Another three.
This was on the review. Remember, we made some suggested revisions to the rules, and Linda's passing this out to you now. You said before you acted on it, you wanted to get Bob's opinion of this, and Bob's opinion is in the packet. And it starts, I believe, on page 96.
Yes.
Well, I think most of the changes Chris made were just housekeeping. For example, I think the prosecutor's office was listed under both physical, Resource Management Administration Committee and, what's the other one?
Public safety.
Public
Safety and
service. Yeah. And so we decided to just move that. Can't remember which one we decided on there.
Public health and safety.
Same as law enforcement.
Public health.
All right, so is there any interest in approving these revisions?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the outlined revisions to the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners rules.
Support. A motion and support by Thomas. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to the septic treatment facility. Number 1, short-term cash advance on page 99. Larry?
As you recall, get Ross up here. As you recall, at our previous meeting, the board, or the committee decided that, or the board decided it'd be more appropriate to talk about the May advance in conjunction with the resolution that subsequently happened at the Board of Public Works, recommending to the county board and to the 5 guaranteeing townships that the shortfall, that at least there should be a plan in place for the shortfall, and we would continue working on the business plan and the strategic plan for the septic treatment plant to improve operations and cash flow, that at least in the interim, we should have a mechanism in place to cover the shortfall, and the Board of Public Works move forward with a recommendation with 1 vote no, but did pass, that they sent a resolution to us indicating that a 50% split between the 5 townships, and I believe it's based on their percentage of ownership, and the county would make a loan to support the losses moving forward, and that at such point in time, when the plant basically starts making money, that we would be able to collect and reimburse ourselves equally as we contributed until those debts are paid, and that there would be an amount in terms of what the treasurer is getting on an average that we would pay for those loans. And it would be considered basically a certificate of deposit. You might want to view it as that we're going to pay interest on that. So the townships in the city would be, it would be sort of an investment tool for the future. So it would be my suggestion that that the May advance amount would be incorporated into our discussion regarding the 50/50 resolution by the Board of Public Works, and we would just include that advance as a part of the agreement. I would, I guess Sonny's always saying, let's get a motion on the floor, so then we'll have discussion. I would move that the May advance be governed under this new resolution that I'll make, and that we would approve the resolution as presented, with the understanding that we would have a written business plan put in place that we presented to the county, Board of Commissioners, and the 5 townships, and that within that business plan could include, among things, as a dedicated person for new markets, and a plan to increase flow from the 15 miles to the 25-mile radius, that we would continue the liability review of the project manager and the architectural firm, and that when the bonds become available to be refinanced, that we would look at possibly lowering the rate and extending the term to lower that debt service coverage, and that any other new initiatives that would come forward from now to the future be reviewed and presented to the county and to the 5 townships for action that would improve the cash flow situation for the septic treatment plant, and that the purpose behind the business plan is just not just to extend a loan, but to make sure we stay focused, at least on a quarterly basis, on a work plan that continues to move forward in terms of improving the financial situation of the septic treatment plant. So I would make that motion.
Excuse me, Commissioner Inman, is that your entire motion? You want to
Entire
present
motion.
that to me in writing, please?
I got it.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right.
I'll support it, although I don't think I can carry it over to you.
All right, Sonny?
Okay, I think, at least in my mind, we have a multitude of discussions here. Number one is the short-term advance. I think that issue should be handled separately, and then the idea of whether or not we're going to do a 50/50 ownership thing. I believe they're two separate issues, and to combine them into one motion, I won't support that motion, because I want to have the discussion about the shortfall in the short-term advance first. And my discussion in that regard is going to be the same as it was a year ago. The Garrington townships are not committing any of their money toward this shortfall. They're expecting the county to pay all of it. They're 100% on the hook for all of it right now. And the idea that they don't want to commit any of their money, they expect the county to commit our money for that, is not right. If they want to come to us and say we can pay a portion of it, when we got into the idea of paying for the business plan, which we required in February of last year, when we got into the motion to create the business plan, there was a cost to do that. We put our money up. They did not put up one dime of township money. The only money they committed to even pay for that business plan was out of the money that the septic treatment plant had. The Garrington townships are not meeting their obligations in completing this business plan or paying these bonds. And I'm not willing to support any more county money to that facility until such time as the Garrington townships step up with their share.
Chris?
I would agree with Commissioner Wheelock that
Tell you
we
what,
need...
this is getting scary.
I know, it is frightening, isn't it? Resource recovery and now this. I would agree that we need to have two separate discussions, one on the short-term advance and one on their other proposal and resolution.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, a roll call vote, please, on Larry Inman's motion.
Commissioner Thomas?
Well, I only seconded it for discussion. No.
Richardson?
No.
Stepka?
No.
Friend?
This is on the resolution as presented right here, right? No.
Inman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
No.
Fleece?
No.
Max Bauer?
No.
Chairman Hooper?
No.
All right.
Well, how you like that one?
Hey, that one went smooth. Now let's go back to the original discussion.
At least we had the motion before we had the discussion,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that part.
God, I'd hate to repeat that whole thing all over
You
again.
got to make it legal.
All right, go ahead on the first item,
Now
Sonny.
we're on,
Yeah.
back to May. First payment, are we going to, Ross?
Well, I'll make a motion. In terms of the May payment, which the county has already made on behalf of the septic plant, I move that we ask the 5 guaranteeing townships to reimburse the county.
Support.
When?
Now.
Now,
For the whole amount?
for the amount of the May, yes, for the amount of the money that we advanced on May 1st.
It's about $150,000, isn't it?
Somewhere around there.
I think around 125. I can get you an
125?
exact number if you'd like. I'll work on that.
Hey, Sonny?
I guess, Ross, my question would be to you as director there. What is the position of the guaranteeing townships toward the repayment of this? You know, up until this year, we've always received the payment for the previous advance prior to asking for additional money. I don't believe that's the case this year.
To straighten it out for you, I think you'll find in your packet, at least it's in my packet, that Dean's figures are $143,455.73. And that included the capacity lease, which is $18,521.40. As of the first of the month, we had a cash balance of about $148,000, so the septic treatment facility could make that payment back at this point in time. Flows are still continuing up. We're not going to be able to make the November payment, but we would have been able to make the payment directly, I think, out of the cash of the septic treatment facility on time. In addition, we have set aside the $230,000 cash to pay out the contract, which had been used in the past, so that's been reimbursed. So, looking at this morning's paper where the Record Eagle says the citizens have been paying for a lot of this for a long time. They have paid the townships, the county, and that county has advanced money, but there hasn't been any other money other than revenues from flow. So I think if you want to say that they want to pay it back, we'll take the money out of the septic treatment facility budget and pay it back. The townships are on the hook to make the payments, and they are each considering resolutions at the present time to look at the future, and that's the other part. But I agree wholeheartedly. I think you should deal with the current bond payment, which was there. Bill Wilkes is never going to let you go beyond a date for a bond payment. So I think if they want to be reimbursed, and whether it's now or whether you want to look at whether that's something you carry on at 50/50, that's up to this board. There's no question on that.
My concern is, you know, when we commit Grand Traverse County General Fund monies to make this bond payment, and even when you tell me you're going to pay it out of the septic treatment facilities payment, that is still not coming from the guaranteeing townships. Those townships are on the hook fiscally in their general budgets to pay this facility bond. The idea is they're supposed to derive the revenue from it also. And I absolutely believe this is the right thing to do, and there's no question about that. My problem is I'm tired of them continuously coming to us for money when it's not my signature on the bottom of this contract, it's theirs.
And I don't disagree with your point at all. I think that it's long overdue that we do something. I think we've been somewhat curtailed by the investigation because that's drug on, and there are things that we can't do to change it. On the other hand, I think right now, if it's a matter of reimbursing the county for that, that would be the first place the money would come from. If we're short for something else, then it's got to come from the townships. There's no question. And we are working on the business plan. There's been a lot more discussion, a lot more work since the last finance subcommittee on some other plans. A business plan will be developed, and right now I'm going through 7 file boxes full of records, because we had the meeting with the attorneys next week. And so it's up to the board here, whatever you want to do. The payment for the bond has been made, we have the cash to reimburse you now, and if you want to do that, we can do that.
How is it if they pay out of the septic revenue, that's not from the townships?
Because that's a user fee.
Coming out of revenue.
That's money that's derived from a user fee. That's not
So
money that's coming from
whose money
the
are you saying that is?
Sorry?
Whose money are you saying that is?
Whoever's waste was hauled to the septic treatment plant.
Understand, but once come on, when I send my payment into Kohl's, it's no longer my money, it's Kohl's money. So whose money is it?
It's the Board of Public Works. It does end up being the Board of Public Works money.
Yep. Well, indirectly, it's the township's money, because we bill back to the townships, like in sewer and water, they get billed back every month. In this case, as long as they're making money, there's no bill back. If we are losing money, then you're correct. If we weren't making operational expenses, that's another whole thing. We'll make operational expenses through November, but we won't be able to cover the bond payment. That's where our problem is.
And that's the whole discussion that we've been having for 2.5 years, is we're making money to cover the operationals, but we're not making the money to pay for the capital investment.
That's exactly true.
Chris?
Ross, I've heard for months, we're working on a business plan, we're working on a business plan. I mean, I've heard it over and over and over, and nothing has been presented. I do not believe that we are going, and I'm honestly saying this, I do not believe that unless we say to the 5 guaranteeing townships, you must reimburse the county, I don't believe we are going to see a business plan. And I certainly am going to support this motion.
There is no motion.
Yes, there is.
What's the motion?
Pay back the bond.
To ask the 5 guaranteeing townships to reimburse the county.
You need to clarify that motion, the townships, the Board of Public Works does have the authority to make payment with their available cash.
That's fine.
That's fine. That's what
So
we're
as long
asking.
as you understand that.
If
there's a shortfall,
I believe the motion is that the money advanced by Grand Traverse County will be repaid
By the
directly.
5 guaranteeing townships is what the
Whether
motion
it comes through the Board of Public Works or whether it comes from the individual townships, we can't tell them what pocket they take their money out of.
Right.
Larry?
I won't be supporting Ross's motion on full repayment. I would support a motion where the septic plant provided 50% of the shortfall, and will provide 50%. The 50% that the septic plant provides through whatever funds would be at our interest rate. So we'd be getting interest. To make them pay that back in full right now out of their operating capital, obviously going to put them a little short. I don't see the need for that. I think if we do 50-50, because come November, if it's 50%, and whatever the figure is in November, say it's 200,000, we'll provide 100,000, they'll provide 100,000, and they'll pay interest on it, so.
Any further discussion?
Question.
Mike?
No.
Ross, previous reimbursements have come from the septic treatment facility fund.
All the funds we've been able to do since it opened 4.5 years ago have come from fees.
Okay.
And as I say, we're back at least where we have recreated the reserve for the closing out of the contract. We still owe the county $107,000.
Yeah, just the numbers, Bill brought the numbers up. They owe the county $105,168 from last year's. And in May, you only had to loan them an additional $58,602 instead of $125 or $150. That's how the cash worked out.
What was that again?
$58,602. So the total they now owe us is $163,770.
But my motion was just for the $58,602.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, so that's what we're asking for.
What are we asking for?
$58,602.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to
In this
point out.
motion?
Yes, I just want to point out, I don't know specifically what the gentleman in the audience wanted to speak about, but remember, just a reminder that there's a gentleman who wanted to speak on this issue, and I didn't want to forget about him.
Okay, so the motion is to repay, that the 13 townships repay the county $58,602.
Which represents the difference between the cash balance and what they owe us.
Okay.
No, that represents the advance for the
May
May
1st.
bond.
May 1st bond payment.
We're discussing the May 1st payment period.
Right. It has nothing to do with the previous $105,000
That's
that they
correct.
still owe us from last year's payment. Well, it'd probably be last November's payment, isn't it, Ross?
Yes, it was, yeah.
So it'd be from last November's payment.
So you're taking could I
All we're
clarify?
talking about is the May bond payment that we made.
Right.
We've already made the other commitment.
Correct.
My opinion is, I want to address this May bond payment, and then we would have a discussion about when we
Right.
see the business plan, whether the business plan incorporates the 50% thing or whatever. That's part of the business plan, but I want to see the business plan they come up with first.
All right.
Okay, I see this as a reasonable request, $58,000. It doesn't cause an undue hardship on the septic treatment plant, won't necessarily nick their operating budget too deeply. I'm going to support this.
I guess I'm still confused on the motion. Is the $58,000, does that represent the difference between the bond payment and the cash position at the septic treatment plant?
On May 1st.
On May 1?
Yes.
All right, that's all I need to know.
I need to ask a clarification now, if I can, because I want to make
Okay.
sure we get this straight. Is this motion saying that you're going to ask them to put township cash into this budget, or are you saying they can use cash that's available in the septage fund? And you're not saying a loan with interest, they can do that as an option?
My intention is that the $58,602 that we advanced on May 1st be repaid by the 5 guaranteeing townships. Now, they have obviously the septage plant fund at their disposal. If they have enough money in that, then they can pay it out of that. If they don't, they can go back to their individual townships and figure out how to divvy it up.
Okay.
The intent of this motion is to recoup the $58,602.
The idea is
As
to
of May
make Grand
1st.
Traverse County whole.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay,
at least for
Linda, I
that
think we
day.
have a roll call vote on this, please.
Commissioner Richardson,
Yes.
Stepka,
Yes.
Friend,
No.
Inman,
Yes.
Wheelock,
Yes.
Fleece,
No.
Max Bauer,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Chairman Hooper.
Yes. Okay, motion carries.
7-2.
And that will be then presented to probably Sewer and Water.
And it'll go through the process of claims at the Board of Public Works meeting.
Okay. Larry?
I guess, coming back to the other discussion item, Sonny had indicated he'd rather see the business plan before moving forward with the recommendation of the 50/50 plan resolution. And I think for the sake of timeliness, and that the fact that it's going out to the 5 other townships, and I know Acme approved it last night, that
East Bay on Monday.
East Bay on Monday, that we would support the resolution as presented, subject to the acceptance of the business plan that would be presented before the county would release any funds on a loan.
Larry, just a couple things on
Yes.
on this resolution. One thing I noticed that it doesn't, at least I don't think, it states in here that on the 50/50 that any funds that are then received to be reimbursed, that the county be reimbursed prior to the townships. That's not in there,
Well,
correct?
The intent was that there would be an equal share reimbursed among the townships in the county at the same portion that we gave in. So there would be a priority, I mean, we'd all share. The money would be reimbursed back at the same level, a proportionate level.
I'd like to see the county reimbursed first. The other thing is, you mentioned about the review, that this kind of being premised on the continuation of the review. I don't see that in here. And also the 5-year term, I'm concerned about the number of years with that. I would rather see it a little bit shorter of a term.
Okay, Ross, you have a comment?
I'm just amazed at the willingness of certain members of this board to, take on a 50% liability for this plant with absolutely no idea of where the money is going to come from or how it's going to be paid for. And it seems to me that that's the key question that, has to be agreed to before we decide what the county's participation is going to be.
That's the cash basis. Chris?
And before we decide what the county's participation is going to be, where, Dennis, are we going to get this kind of money? We have a $2 million hole this year.
Well, remember that I can't answer where we'll get the money in terms of, because I don't know how much money it's going to be. If it's 2.8 million and we have half of that, that's an assumption. But remember that we're talking about this being a loan from cash as opposed to a loan from appropriation. So if you're making a true loan, it's as long as the cash is there. You could say, for example, if it's at the rate of our return, it might be money that we normally invest. And that cash is usually invested at 3%. It's going to be put here at 3%. The difference is at the end of a defined term with the investment, it's coming back.
And
you
we-
don't know whether it's
And we don't know if it's
here.
coming back with the septic treatment
it's
facility
important-
because we have no business plan.
I don't disagree with you. What I'm saying, though, in answer to the question, it will not come out of appropriation, it's going to come out of cash that's in the county, and you have to make that distinction. So Bill could answer better than that, but I think that's kind of the way, that's the answer. That's the answer. It would come out of our available cash. If we're investing $5 million a year, well, that part of that would go into this, and we'd be getting the same interest back on it as long as interest was being paid. Yes. I want Bill to also mention, I asked Bill to go look real quickly at the cash position, and I think his numbers don't agree with Ross's numbers. They may be because we haven't seen all the revenues yet, but let's tell the board what you have.
Well, at the end of April, we had a negative cash balance of $58,602.88, in addition to the $105,000 that they owed us from the previous loan. And then, as of today, that $58,000 is now $72,000. So the operating revenue and expense.
Positive or negative balance?
Negative.
Oh, so we've
It's
actually
gone from
gone down.
58.
Going down.
Now,
Yeah.
that may be because revenues have been recorded.
There could be this is strictly, I maintain it strictly on the cash basis, expenses going out, revenues coming in. So that 58 has grown to 72 as of yesterday.
Bill?
But,
I have a question. Now, obviously, the $58,602 is the payment, is the money the county advanced for the bond payment.
correct, we had bond payments of about $150,000.
So even though the county did that, they've still, cash-wise, have gone down $14,000 since then?
Yeah. About that. But that's,
With that being said, any revenue, there may be costs incurred, it's no different than any other business. I
Right.
incur costs all month, but I may not get paid for them until the end of the month, so-
Right.
or the 15th of next month.
I understand.
So, I understand that part of it, too.
I'd just like to add, too, as stated, that we don't know where any money to pay this back is going to come from, but the plan is generating money constantly, and we're working on other options and bringing other counties into this picture of reimbursement, and the county has been reimbursed continually over the years, and to say that we don't know where this money is coming from is really not true, because the plant does generate money.
It doesn't generate enough money, though, Bruce.
I guess the comments that I would have is, one, I'm understanding for sure that this is not an appropriation to the septic plant. It's not out of our general fund money. This would strictly be us buying a bond or, investing money just like we do in anything else. And I'm not completely opposed to that, although I'm opposed to that until such time as I actually in fact see a business plan of where they're going to be able to repay the bills.
Do we have a motion? We don't.
I'll make a motion.
You started one, that was never seconded.
Who has the floor, myself or Commissioner Friend?
Beth?
Okay. She won.
Those are too long.
I understand Commissioner Richardson and Commissioner Maxbauer's concern. As a matter of fact, when I learned that the BPW passed this motion, I sent a text message to Dennis and I said, and I assume when they have an idea of, when they pass this motion that they have an idea of what they will employ in services and staff to generate the revenue so that this is just not a bad loan. So I do understand what you're saying. I also understand that the county has been as culpable in this situation as the townships have been. So again, I am not happy with the resolution as it is currently stated, but I would agree to the 50-50 cost sharing as long as the county were reimbursed first. There was a commitment to continuing the review and that the terms be brought down to more like a year. So I would make a motion that we would bring this resolution to the Board of Commissioners meeting as a recommendation with those changes, that the term be 1 year, that the county be reimbursed first, and that there is a commitment to continuing with the review.
Could you be more, it should be more specific. What are you talking about, the resolution on 108?
Yes.
So you're changing the term to
1 year.
1 year instead of 5 years?
Yep. The county will be reimbursed first. And the terminology in here that would show a level of commitment to the review.
The legal review.
The legal review.
Legal review. I'll support that.
Why the 1 year?
Because I still think that there's a lot of indecision, a lot of things to be worked out, and I feel far more comfortable with 1 year than 5 years.
You're going to be gone, though.
Look at her smile.
She's smiling for the first time.
You know, I think we ought to be more reasonable than 1 year. It ought to be at least 2 years. You know, if you don't like 5 years. You know, we're treating them like they're going to pick up their bags and leave town. I don't think that's going to happen at all. In fact, I have a lot of faith in that septic plant that down the road, it'll operate like it should and with the appropriate funding. And another thing that appalls me is we spent $50,000 of county money on a study that was allegedly a business plan. And all I hear this morning is we got to have a business plan. Well, I hope we're not paying for this one, because business plan is not the magic deal. Ross knows exactly what that plant has to do to produce the necessary gallonage and so forth to make a profit so we can afford to pay its bills. And for us, I was thinking this morning, well, Ross wants $58,602. Boy, they don't, if we had the $50,000 from the study, which seems to have went by the wayside, they'd only have to give us $6,000. You know, the business plan is not the magic. It's just common sense running a business, just like Wheelock stated. You know, you got expenses going out, income coming in. It's normal business procedure.
Okay, Sonny.
I guess my comment would be that the previous motion takes care of the May payment. I don't know why we have to rush into making a decision in regard to finances of this plant, because we don't have another payment due until November. Let's actually see if we can, between now and August or September, truly see something that's documented, you know, and I believe Ross has started putting, you know, is ongoing putting together numbers that projects where their revenues are going to be and where their expenses are going to be, and that should be outlined to us. And I believe all of that will, in fact, come to us. I don't know why there's a rush for us to commit anything in funds in any form, whether it even be a pledge of 50% now, because we've taken care of the May payment. So we don't have to do anything else as far as financially with the septic plant until November.
Ross.
Contrary to some popular opinion, I am not trying to punish the 5 guaranteeing townships for the fact that they guaranteed this plant some 8 or 9 years ago. I am, however, trying to get, people to get realistic about, how deep the financial hole here is. I'm still amazed that, you're all ready to, step off the cliff with no idea where the bottom is. And I think the bottom is much, much farther down than, many of you think. The whole problem is that people have been chasing butterflies on this thing for several years now on how it's going to be paid for. And, we know what we have to do to make this thing solvent, and we're all afraid to do it politically. So I'm going to vote against this.
Larry?
Well, I think we have a recommendation from the Board of Public Works that has a lot of merit, and I think it's, the purpose behind it was, at a minimum, to have, a short, what they would view as a plan that would at least cover us in and you might want to view it 5 years as a short-term plan, that, we'd have something in place, but, the intention of the Board of Public Works is to continue through this process of improving the financial situation of the plant, and that hopefully we don't have to have up to 5 years of contributions. And, we have an opportunity in 2013 and 2014, possibly refinance these bonds and go to a longer term and a lower rate, which would substantially reduce the balance, along with a radius increase of 25 miles around, and the dedicated person that they're looking at, in terms of Ross, looking at extra flows. I think we've got a lot of things in place that are positive. So, I'm not going to vote for the motion. I think we ought to approve it as it stands, contingent upon the acceptance of the business plan by the Board of Commissioners. And, we don't have to fund it until we agree with the business plan. So, I think that's the way I'd like to see it handled, so I'm going to vote no on the motion.
So let me ask you a question. So you like the resolution the way that it is? Mm-hmm. Okay. So are you opposed to a commitment to the legal review?
No.
Okay. Are you opposed to the county being reimbursed first?
Yes.
Okay. And are you opposed to the 1-year term versus the 5-year term?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to be clear. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, but I'd like, if there's any public comment, would you like to state that now? Or?
At this point, I'm just kind of listening to
Okay.
what's going on, and it's just really scary to go into a business plan. Because if this was a entity that made a profit, it'd be bankrupt a long time ago, which you are, in my opinion. But my question is Bay Harbor still trucking their running through your plan or not?
No, they were out a month ago. Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking for other funding from other counties to go around it, not the whole.
Not necessarily from other counties, but other waste streams, yes.
And when will it break even or make a profit?
Well, you're going to have to look at a business plan which is being developed, and I think that's going to come next week, not next week, 2 weeks. Again, there was a business plan that was put in which did not come about. The flows were bad, there were errors. There are the issues in the investigation and the litigation. We don't know when that will come to an end, but we have still not accepted the plan. Therefore, we can't make operational changes to make major improvements in the operating plan. We've made some. The budget I just received yesterday from OMI, the budget for next year will be about $25,000 less in operation under the current conditions. So and some of those things in the electrical use. Some of the things that are not in the projections are the reimbursement from Consumers Power. We did not do that. We wanted to give everybody the worst case scenario. We're not going to make the same mistake they made 5 years ago. And they will be realistic figures that are put out there, and you can challenge them. I think they will be supported. I think you will see adoption of a business plan, and I think I don't see a problem with the continuing on the legal review, because that is going to happen. That meeting is next week to start off with on that. That's not going to end in the near future. And I don't disagree either that the county ought to be first in line to be reimbursed. The people that are on the line are the townships. The 5-year term, what I would ask for is you do it long enough to look at where you could redo the bonds. That is a critical thing in my estimation, because you have the potential of reducing that debt load by quite a bit. So I think the other things, and contingent upon the business plan is a fine thing. You do need to have a solid business plan that everybody understands. You haven't had one, and I agree with that.
Larry?
Ross, if you're telling us that you believe you can compose among the Board of Public Works and whomever, everything we've got in place and just getting it consolidated into a business plan, and you'd have that available in 2 weeks, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem having this issue, this resolution being discussed at the next Resource Administrative Committee.
My understanding of...
Before, and then we could take action on the resolution at that time.
My understanding on the work that's going into the business plan will be put out and will be tested by phone surveys to see what it's going to produce in revenue. And that if it doesn't, then they'll come back to addressing exactly what Mr. Richardson says is, do we deal with the special assessment?
So when can we look at the business plan?
They've changed the Septage Finance Committee meeting from the Thursday to the Friday, I think, because Dean Bott is not going to be available on the Thursday.
So they're going to address the business plan? Is that what they're going to do?
I think that's the intent of the township supervisors. I know that Rob Manigault has led that proposal. He's drafted material and got it out to the other 4 townships, and hopefully it's going to come back.
All right. I mean, with that information...
Not that they're not doing it, I think they are.
Yeah. I mean, with that information, I'd be cool with what Sonny is suggesting, is that, you know, I'm going to vote no.
We have a motion.
I understand.
We have a motion on the
I'm not going to
floor,
repeat them. I mean, I'm not making another motion. I'm just saying that...
Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Let's just call the motion, and then we can talk about the other part.
All right.
Roll call?
Mr. Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Inman?
No.
Wheelock?
No.
Please?
No.
Max Bauer?
No.
Thomas?
No.
Richardson?
No.
Chairman Hooper?
No.
7-2 fails.
7-2 fail.
I would make a motion that we...
I don't know that we need a motion, we can just have this come back to us next month with the new information.
That's fine. That was going to be my motion.
Is that consensus?
We'll just put it back on.
We'll just do our consensus.
Is that
then.
fine?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Put the
And then, now we can move on to resolution to support the statutory amendment to the Board of Public Works.
move for approval.
You got a motion for approval?
Second, and I have a question.
We have a motion to support, motion by Thomas, support by Inman. Any further discussion, Inman?
At Acme Township, they had this, and there was a great deal of confusion about exactly what the intent was in terms of what you were trying to drive at in terms of the ultimate number of people you were trying to get on the Board of Public Works for Grand Traverse County. And they could not come to conclusion on it, so they delayed the discussion on a resolution. All I'm saying is, you know, they didn't know, and we looked at it, I wasn't quite sure, so we need to clarify that.
Well, I don't think our intention was to come to a final solution on what it would look like. I think that's something that you would do at a later date. What we were trying to do here was make it broad enough so that you had flexibility.
But what was the optimum number is the question.
And the maximum would be 15. It could be 11, 13, or 15.
Okay, that was the question that they had.
Yeah, you have to keep it to an odd number.
Right.
You want to.
All right.
This legislation could take it up to 15.
All right, that's the question.
One of which has to be the drain.
So you're going to have to get with Wayne Clyder on that. All right, okay.
Hey, Ross?
Those townships are the ones that want to make the change.
I'm going to vote against this because I think we're just distracting ourselves and it's pointless. And I said before that I didn't think we need to restructure the Board of Public Works until we figure out how to finance the septic plant. And finally, it seems like, you know, the 5 guaranteeing townships who seem to think that their voice is not being heard are getting exactly what they want out of the Board of Public Works anyway, so I don't know what the issue is.
They sure are with the septic street, and sewer and water, they get everything, that's what sewer water is, the 5 guaranteeing townships plus. So, I agree with Ross on that. Mike, do you have a comment?
No.
Oh.
Well, the other thing is, when we were going to eventually have the discussion about the restructuring of Board of Public Works, and we started having some of that discussion this morning about resource recovery. You know, if we're going to have them come direct here. And I believe that restructuring all comes in place. That being said, I believe if it is our intent, or even possibly our intent, to expand the Board of Public Works, the legislature, in case no one has noticed, doesn't move very fast. So if you want to request the ability to a legislative change that will allow you the flexibility to expand the Board of Public Works, then you need to endorse the statutory amendment request.
That's what this is for.
Why would we want to expand the Board of Public Works?
I guess that depends on what you're going to charge the Board of Public Works with doing, and who you're asking them to represent.
I mean, there's a large number right now.
Right. All right, we have a motion on the floor, and for discussion, Beth?
I'm not saying this is my opinion, I'm just trying to answer your question. I think the thing is to try to get rid of the redundancy of having the sewer and water report to the Board of Public Works.
And a G5.
And the G5. Personally, my opinion is, I'll support this, but have a Board of Public Works, have the Board of Public Works. I think they should dissolve this G5, and I think they should dissolve the sewer and water.
Which would save
And
probably
then if
$30,000,
those
$40,000 a
townships,
year.
if those townships want an authority, that's fine, they can do an authority. If they choose to continue to subcontract with the DPW, then that's terrific too. And if they do that, we have an entity to manage the DPW, and that's the BPW.
Okay.
The savings to remove the sewer and water and the G5 is about $45,000 to $50,000 a year.
Is there not any, and I should probably ask you this, well, I will ask you not in a meeting, never mind.
What was that?
Nothing.
And we should note that
Never
neither
mind.
the G5 nor the Sewer and Water Committee was appointed by this board.
That was kind of my question, because that was done through, the sewer and water was done through an amendment to a contract, or a document, right?
It's the master sewer and water agreement.
Right, and that was never brought to the Board of Commissioners, so I remember asking John Axe, is it even legitimate? And he said that's questionable. So I wanted to make sure that's what I heard, is that right?
It's correct. It's a subcommittee of the Board of Public Works, which I think they have the ability to create subcommittees like they did with G5, but again, those are not those appointments. And I think Beth has very clearly stated all the facts. It's a matter of, if you create the Board of Public Works, you get rid of the other, which is time-consuming and duplication of a lot of effort. And then if they want to go to an authority, they have their right to go to an authority. They own the sewer and water system, and they don't own, but would own, once the bonds are paid off, the septic treatment facility. So it's
All right, we have a motion.
Just to clarify, I have to clarify that, Ross. 'Cause-
Resolution.
Well, it's important to clarify this. They could own the septic treatment facility. What I'm hearing from them is they don't want to own the septic treatment
Well, he's already
facility.
sent us letters to that effect.
Right, yes,
Could be, that's true. But technically, they are responsible for it.
yes.
Okay, I think we need a roll call vote on the motion to approve this resolution.
Commissioner Friend,
Restate that motion for me. I just
To
drew a
approve the
blank.
resolution on page 109.
Yes.
Inman,
Yes.
Wheelock,
Yes.
Fleece,
Yes.
Axbauer,
No.
Thomas,
Yes.
Richardson,
No.
Stepka,
Yes.
Chairman Hooper.
Yes. Pass.
7-2.
7-2 again.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Larry.
If I could ask the indulgence of the committee, on the previous motion regarding requesting the townships to come up with a differential of $58,000 for the May payment, I know that once we communicate that, I think there's going to be a couple questions that might probably come back to us, and that is, they're going to ask, well, is that going to be considered a loan, or is that not going to be considered a loan? First question. Second question is, if it's not considered a loan and it's an appropriation, is it gone forever? Or can we recapture that payment that we're going to send in at some later date when the plant starts making money. So I think we need to answer both those questions.
Well, I think it's not considered a loan. I mean,
We-
an appropriation,
I mean,
for sure.
It wasn't part, I wasn't clear on, I was clear on the motion, but I wasn't clear on,
Well, for
is
one
it
thing,
is it a
we didn't
forever,
make
is it
a
a forever
motion.
loss deal, or, I mean, we need to be upfront with it.
We didn't make a
We
motion.
want a forever loss.
Well, if they pay $58,000, they're gonna
Oh.
come back and say, one day when the plant's making money, Jay, we made that advance for that
They're
May
not-
payment. Could we
No,
be
it's our money.
No.
It's our
We
money.
gave them the money to make the payment that they
First
had
and
to make.
foremost,
I understand that.
They're giving us the money back.
Well, then
We
then
lent
would the
them.
Board of Public Works pay us back?
They already are paying us
They're
back. There's
paying us
nothing else to
back.
pay us back.
With our motion, they're paying us back.
I understand that. They're advancing the money.
No, it's
No,
not
we're not
advanced.
advancing.
we owe it
We
to us.
advance the money, they're paying us back.
You know what?
I understand that. But the question is, if the plant's going to make money at some point in the future, they're going to say, can we be reimbursed for
They're
the
not
amount of
going-
money that we sent in?
they're not going
For the
to-
They
payment?
haven't put
Then
any
we'd
out
still
there.
have
They're not going
58,000.
to, they're not going to put any money into this, Larry.
It's not going to come out of their.
They're going to go right to the septic fund,
Yeah.
and if Ross is right and there's $140,000 in the balance, they're just going to transfer it back over to us. It's going to come right out of the septic fund, and if they're not going to do any better the rest of the year, they're going to be $58,000 more short in November when the bond payment
All
comes
right,
due.
all
They're
right.
not going to take it out of their townships.
And if they did, they'd repay themselves when they could.
All right.
that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Now I understand how this.
Okay, let's,
All right.
okay, we've, I think we're down to new business.
Thanks, Ross.
Go sell a few gallons. Go sell a few gallons.
You want to buy some?
Now we know why we have attorneys in this world to straighten us out.
All right, any new business? We have this time for a second public comment. Anybody in the public who would like to address the board at this time? Okay, Commissioner Committee reports. All right. Sonny?
Just an update, we talked about it just a little bit when Bob was here earlier this morning. Resource Recovery Council the other night passed two motions. The first one is to declare ask the Board of Public Works to declare Grand Traverse County curbside, the entire county to be a curbside district, and number two, to eliminate the drop-off sites.
Yes.
All right.
Nothing controversial about that.
No, more done in 10 minutes than we got done in 10 years.
Controversial about that.
Not until the word gets out.
Yes. Okay, would you like to read the notices?
I just want to point out the Siegel Ad
Do we need
Hoc
to?
Committee is rescheduled to this
Okay.
Thursday at 3. Board of Commissioners study session with Tattle is Thursday, June 3rd at 6:30 in the second floor training room. And the 2% grant presentations interviews are June 8th at 8 a.m. in the commission chambers. Lastly, to remind you all, the Police Memorial Day program will be this Friday at 1 p.m. here in front of the Governmental Center. Commissioners are all invited.
I thought that was last Friday.
No, it's Friday the 14th.
This Friday.
I'll get it.
Okay.
Gee, I thought I missed it last week.
All right. Any other questions or additions?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, Larry.
Say goodbye to
I have one announcement. Sunday, starting at 11 a.m., if you don't have a full agenda and you want some free entertainment and enjoyment, the Northwestern Michigan Draft Horse and Mule Association is putting on Plow Days up on Hilltop Road, which is 4 miles south of Chum's Corners and a mile west. Everything's free, and it's really an enjoyable day if you care to partake.
Great. Now we'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
All right, we're out of here.
Thank you.